and seeking your approval to do that. Really, it's a critical piece for us to have a robust testing strategy this spring. Abbott ID test, rapid testing is going to be a key part of our symptomatic testing process. So I've tried to explain this several different times, and everybody, it gets a little confusing. I'd be happy to answer any questions or go back through it again if that's helpful. And so Nathan, I don't know if that's.
For sure. So yeah, just so everyone's aware, Ethan was here just to introduce the idea of the resolution that we all will be voting on next week, and it'll be read later tonight's meeting. He was here to provide some additional context and overview. Are there any questions for Chief Financial Officer Ethan at this time? If you have any questions, please remember, indicate so in the chat, regardless of where you may be located. Just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Are there any questions at all for our speaker? Seeing none, Ethan, thank you so much for coming in tonight and to introduce this. I think that your explanation and expertise was really helpful and really valued by everyone in Student Senate. So thank you for that.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. With that, we have exhausted all scheduled open period speakers for tonight. Are there any additional open period speakers for first open period? Seeing none, we'll now move forward with our agenda, and we will move into approval of the minutes. The minutes were distributed earlier this week. Are there any changes or corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes? It has been moved by Caucus Leader Atchison. Is there a second? Seconded by Caucus Leader Phillips. Are there any objections to approving the minutes? Seeing none, the minutes will stand approved. Thank you all. With that, we'll now move into announcements for tonight. So announcements for tonight. First, next Thursday, November 19th, will be the last meeting of Student Senate for the fall semester. SGA does not meet during Dead Week or Finals Week, which are both after Thanksgiving this year. So because of that, next week is your last week of SGA for the semester. It came crazy fast this year. Barring any unforeseen complications from tonight's meeting, we will look to host another hybridized meeting of Student Senate next week for any individuals who wish to attend in person. Just a reminder, you do have to be pre-registered for that, and we check in people to ensure that we're following all like social distancing guidelines and everything like that. Another reminder, because we're approaching the end of the term, is that if you have any legislation that you would like to see submitted before the end of the semester, please make sure to submit that to the Senate Operations Committee by next Monday, November 16th at 5 p.m. So it'll be on that final agenda for this semester. Second announcement is that the application for Attorney General is currently live. This is the position that runs the judicial branch and is vital in resolving student code of conduct complaints. That application will close at 5 p.m. tomorrow night. If you have any questions, please reach out to current Attorney General Ashton Hess. You can wave to the room, Ashton. And so her email is listed on the agenda, and you can find the link there as well. Those interviews will be held this coming Sunday evening as well. Third, in the spring semester, the SGA Treasurer, Alan Hines, will chair the Student-Centered Tuition Enhancement, or SCTE, committee for short. This committee provides funding for new initiatives and projects on campus. Previous projects funded include Cat's Cupboard, PowerCat Financial, the Green Action Fund, the Diversity Programming Committee, et cetera, all received their funds from SCTE when they first started. We need 6 student senators to serve on this committee in the coming spring. I've currently had 4 student senators reach out to me. So I need 2 more individuals who'd be willing to serve in this capacity. please email me if you would like to. This is a really cool committee. I've heard it's really fun from those who've been on it before, and it's not a large time investment. I believe at most they have 5 meetings. Does that sound right, Blake? Yeah. So like you would basically meet 5 times in the spring semester. So not a huge commitment, and a really cool committee that gets to look over like a lot of cool project applications. Next up, the sustainability director for the executive branch, Grace Ryman, is looking for 1 student senator to serve on the Green Action Fund Committee as a representative of Student Senate. This committee is tasked with allocating funding to promote projects that make a more sustainable campus. This committee has a relatively short time commitment, and they will meet a few times this fall semester, and I believe that they may actually be meeting after Thanksgiving break, but it should be no more than 1 or 2 meetings, so a relatively short commitment. I do need 1 individual to serve in this capacity, so if you would be willing to serve on the Green Action Fund Committee, if you're passionate about like sustainability related projects, please just shoot me an email right now, and I will appoint you to that committee and get you in touch with Director Ryman. Proxies for tonight, please remember that if you're ever going to be absent for any reason, just to fill out that proxy form. So we have Rodriguez for Glasscock, Snyder Blaine for Fox. I had 2 others that, if you can see, I forgot to check earlier in the day. So there's, I believe, Atchison for Volgamore, and then Grills for McVeigh are the other 2. So yes, please remember that if you're ever going to be absent, fill out that proxy form. And then last, the SGA Member of the Week is Sexual Assault Prevention and Awareness Director, Sarah Haggard. SGA would like to thank Sarah for her hard work creating the resolution that we'll be looking at later tonight with recommendations on KSU's Title IX policy. Sarah's work is helping to hold university officials accountable, and she is serving as an excellent advocate for students who are really in need. Thank you for your work on this incredibly important topic, Sarah. So with that, could we get some clapping gifs, or if you're in Wildcat Chambers, feel free to clap. So we appreciate your work, Sarah. With that, on the upcoming events calendar, again, you'll just notice that next week is the last week of things. So again, please remember that. Enjoy your very long 2-month winter break after next week. With that, our quote of the week is, "It is better to take many small steps in the right direction than to make a great leap forward only to stumble backward." And that's by Louis Sacker. With that, we will now move into commendations this evening. First up is Resolution 38. Is there a motion to consider Resolution 38? It has been moved by Chair Booz. Is there a second? Seconded by Senator Kraslow. With that, will the author of Resolution 38 please come forward?
Hello, everyone. So Resolution 2021-38, commendation to Bailey Hinkle and Devin Brand by Gerardo Hernandez, Bryce Atchison, Lane Manners, and J.W. Wells. Whereas the 2020 Agricultural and Applied Economics Association's National Case Study Competition was held on August 10th to the 11th virtually for the first time. Whereas the students were given an in-depth case study covering a real business venture, Solimflec, a Brazilian technology and precision agricultural company that wants to establish a foothold in the United States. Whereas Bailey Hinkle and Devin Brand had a month to prepare their proposed solutions and strategies for the company and to submit them in the form of a video presentation. Whereas video submissions were reviewed by a panel of judges, including faculty from across the United States, as well as Chief Operating Officer of Solimflec. Whereas Hinkle and Brand, master students in agriculture economics, competed in the case study competition and placed first. Whereas in the past 20 years, K-State Agriculture Economics case study team has placed in the top 12 times and has placed first 7 times in the Agricultural and Applied Economics Association competition. And whereas this continues the tradition of K-State Agriculture Economics graduates, students placing top in the national and international competition, be it resolved that the Kansas State University Student Governing Association commends Bailey Hinkle, Devin Brand, and team advisor Alexa Shenoyan, Associate Professor of Agricultural Economics, for their hard work and dedication to achieving this accomplishment, as well as the Department of Agricultural Economics for providing students with these opportunities to further their professional careers. Section 2, upon passage by the Student Senate and signature of the student body president, a copy of this resolution shall be sent to Bailey Hinkle, Devin Brand, Associate Professor of Agriculture Economics, Alexan Shinoyan, Agriculture Economics Department Head Alan Featherstone, the College of Agricultural Dean Dr. Ernie Minton, and University President Richard B. Myers.
Are there any questions or corrections for the author? It looks like Senator Croslow has an addition. Senator Croslow.
Would the authors object to adding Dean Shanklin to Section 2, the Dean of the Graduate School? Both Devin and Bailey are officers in the Graduate Student Council, and they are part of the exec team. I think that the Dean of the school would like to see a copy of this resolution as well.
Gerardo, are you okay with adding Dean Shanklin to the resolution?
Yes, that's totally fine.
Perfect. We will get that change made. Are there any other questions or corrections? Seeing none, I'll now seek a motion on resolution 38. Sorry, yeah, 38. Is there a motion to approve? It's been moved by Senator Croslow. Is there a second? Seconded by Senator Grolms. With that, are there any objections to approving resolution 38? Seeing none, resolution 38 will stand approved. We'll clap for all the commendations at the end. I see people wanting to clap. So with that, we'll now move on to resolution 39. Is there a motion to consider resolution 39? Moved by Chair Rodriguez, seconded by Caucus Leader Diaz de Leon. With that, the author of resolution 39, you can come forward. Caucus Leader Atchison has deferred his rights to speak on this to Director Dowd. Michael, I believe you have the ability to speak on this.
Okay, cool. Resolution 39, commendation to Dr. Barry Flinchbaugh by Bryce Atchison, Michael Dowd, Max Harmon, Gerardo Hernandez, Alan Hines, Lane Lundeen, Lane Manners, Andrew Knoll, Parker Vogelmore, J.W. Wells, and Tel Whitmer. Whereas on the morning of November 2nd, 2020, farm policy icon and professor emeritus Dr. Barry Flinchbaugh passed away from a pacemaker malfunction at 78 years of age. Whereas originally from York, Pennsylvania, Dr. Flinchbaugh began his career in agricultural economics at Penn State University and received a doctorate from Purdue University. Whereas since joining the Kansas State University faculty in 1971 in teaching agricultural policy, Dr. Flinchbaugh has taught over 4,000 students throughout almost 5 decades of instructing, including, in some cases, not only students, but their parents and grandparents as well. Whereas on the national level, Dr. Flinchbaugh was invaluable in the creation of agricultural policy, having been involved to some degree in every U.S. Farm Bill written since 1968. Whereas he was a trusted agricultural policy advisor to many federal, state, and local lawmakers of both parties and chaired the Commission on 21st Century Production Agriculture. Whereas at the local level, he impacted Kansas agriculture through countless interactions with farmers and ranchers and local elected officials. Dr. Flinchbaugh's plain-speaking style and storytelling helped various stakeholders understand complex farm policy programs. Whereas Dr. Flinchbaugh's agricultural policy class, Ag Ec 410, was highly sought out by students across the multitude of majors, and his lectures were renowned for his colorful stories, quick quips, occasional profanities, fist poundings for emphasis, honest truths, and insightful analyses of complex topics. Whereas outside of the classroom, Dr. Flinchbaugh took intentional time to connect with students, listen to their stories, expand their knowledge of ag policy. His accomplishments never preceded his kind-hearted yet no-nonsense mentorship of young people at Kansas State University. And whereas, while the agricultural industry and Kansas State University lost an influential giant, Dr. Flinchbaugh's legacy lives on through the policy he crafted, and more importantly, through the thousands of students whose lives he directly impacted over nearly half a century. Be it resolved that Section 1, the Kansas State University Student Governing Association, commend and honors the life of Dr. Barry Flinchbaugh by celebrating his tremendous impact on foreign policy, Kansas agriculture, and Kansas State University students. Section 2. The KSU SGA offers sincere condolences to those who are mourning the loss of Dr. Flinchbaugh, including but not limited to his wife, family, peers, and teaching assistants, as well as current and former students. Section 3. Upon passage by the Student Senate and signature of the Student Body President, a copy of this resolution shall be sent to Mrs. Kathy Flinchbaugh and family, Dr. Vincent Amanor Boadu, Professor of Agricultural Economics, Reed Middleton and Skylar Zinger, teaching assistants of AgEc 410, all current students of AgEc 410, Dr. Alan Featherstone, Department of Agricultural Economics Head, Dr. Ernie Minton, Dean of the College of Agriculture, President Richard B. Myers, and Provost Charles Tabor.
With that, sorry, I had the wrong things muted and unmuted. I apologize for that. Are there any questions or corrections for Director Dowd? And we did catch the section 3 is section 2. So are there any further questions or corrections? Seeing none, is there a motion on resolution 39? A motion to unanimously approve resolution 39. Moved by Cox Leader Atchison, seconded by Senator Heimerman. Are there any objections to approving resolution 39? Seeing none, resolution 39 will stand approved. Can we have some claps for the resolutions tonight? With that, we will now move into approval of appointments for tonight. So is there a motion to consider resolution 40? Moved by Senator Grolms, seconded by Senator Croslow. With that, will the author of resolution 40 please come forward?
Yeah, I hope everyone can hear me okay. This is resolution 2021-40, approval of new student senators by Senate Operations Committee. Whereas Natasha Norwood resigned from the position of student senator for the College of Arts and Sciences, whereas Jada Johnson is not currently enrolled. Cool, great, you can hear me. Not currently enrolled in the College of Arts and Sciences, whereas when multiple candidates are tied, the Senate Operations Committee chair is mandated to contact all candidates in bulk. Whereas all 64 candidates for the College of Arts and Sciences student senator who received 1 vote were contacted via email on October 26, 2020. Of these candidates, only Alexa Shear, Carissa Jonak, Gus Jarnhorst, and Reese Willis responded with interest. Whereas when more than one candidate is interested in a position that can only be filled by one individual, the Senate Operations Committee is mandated to hold a hearing and decide by majority vote which candidate should fill the position. Whereas the Senate Operations Committee held this hearing on November 9th, 2020, where it conducted interviews with 3 candidates and considered written answers from 1. Whereas the Senate Operations Committee recommends Alexa Shear and Reese Willis for those 2 seats on the basis of their answers, and whereas the unsuccessful candidates will be considered for vacancies before any appointments are made from the appropriate college council or college caucus. Be it resolved that the following individuals be approved as student senators for the College of Arts and Sciences: Alexa Shear and Reese Willis. And also, just as a point, Alexa will be sworn in next week.
Are there any questions or corrections for Chair Booz on this legislation?
In line 30, should it say, did you misspell college in the second for college caucus?
Oh, yes. So we got one in person. Yeah. College is misspelled on line 30. We will make sure to correct that before it's officially signed.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know how I messed up.
Are there any further questions or corrections? Seeing none, I will now seek a motion to approve resolution 40. Is there such a motion? Moved by Senator Gromes, seconded by Caucus Leader Carl. I got a lot of seconds all at once. Seconded by Caucus Leader Carlson. With that, we will now get the new senators sworn in. Alexa was not able to be with us tonight. It was just too late notice for her since she just got notified of this on Monday. But I do believe that Reese Willis is on the call. Reese, if you would like to unmute your video and microphone right now, I'm going to give you the oath of office. It's really quick. All you have to do is raise your right hand, and then at the end, say, "I will." So with that, I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of student senator and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the Kansas State University Student Governing Association.
I do.
Awesome. Can we get some applause for Senator Willis? If you guys didn't notice, we now have 2 Senator Willises. So we're going to have to refer to them like Senator Willis Jackson and Willis Reese. So, hey, that's good though. We're excited to have new senators. With that, we'll move on to Resolution 41. Is there a motion to consider Resolution 41? Moved by Caucus Leader Phillips. Can I get a second from Senator Gromes? With that, will the author of Resolution 41 please come forward? Ashton, you don't even need to worry about your computer. We've got a paper copy up here. That's all. It's tabbed and everything, so nobody has to touch the same paper as everyone else. So, oh, and you'll have to turn the mic on. Yeah, it's 41.
Can you guys hear me?
Are people able to hear Ashton if you are on the Zoom? We're getting a yes, we're good.
Awesome. Resolution 2021-41, approval of the Attorney General Recommendation Committee by Nathan Bothwell, Ashton Hess, and Tel Whitmer. Whereas the Kansas State University Student Governing Association, KSU SGA Judicial Branch is led by the Attorney General. Per the KSU SGA bylaws, the Attorney General is selected by the Attorney General Recommendation Committee in the fall semester, whereas the Attorney General Recommendation Committee is a joint committee that is chaired by the current Attorney General and has representation from all 3 branches of KSU SGA, whereas the student body president appoints 3 members of the executive branch to serve on the Attorney General Recommendation Committee, whereas the Speaker of the Student Senate appoints 3 student senators to serve on the Attorney General Recommendation Committee, whereas the current Attorney General appoints 3 members of the Judicial Branch to serve on the Attorney General Recommendation Committee, and whereas these positions are subject to the approval of Student Senate, be it resolved that Section 1, the following individuals be approved as a legislative branch representatives to the Attorney General Recommendation Committee: Andrew Booz, Marta Reichenberg, and Natalia Rodriguez. Section 2, the following individuals be approved as the executive branch representatives to the Attorney General Recommendation Committee: Michael Dowd, Jeff Ebeck, and Cameron Koger. And Section 3, the following individuals be approved as judicial branch representatives to the Attorney General Recommendation Committee: Adam Bendrick, Grace Palcic, and Matthew Swords.
Are there... Sorry, I'm still getting confused on which one I need to unmute. I have multiple microphones in front of me. I apologize. With that, are there any questions or corrections for the author? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve Resolution 41? Can I get a motion? So moved. Okay, so moved by Senator Gromes, seconded by Caucus Leader Phillips. Are there any objections? Seeing none, Resolution 41 will stand approved. We'll move on to one more resolution of appointments with Resolution 42. Is there a motion to consider Resolution 42? Moved by Chair Booz. Is there a second? Seconded by Caucus Leader Carlson. With that, will the author of Resolution 42 please come forward? Sorry, Trey, I think this one is you. Are you on the call right now? Ashton, since you're a co-sponsor of this, would you just read it? Thank you. If you just want to leave that one on too.
Perfect. Resolution 2021-42, approval of the Elections Committee by Nathan Bothwell, Ashton Hess, Trey Coleman, and Tel Whitmer. Whereas the Kansas State University Student Governing Association Elections Committee is jointly appointed by the Elections Commissioner, Student Body President, Speaker of the Student Senate, and Attorney General. Whereas this position was sufficiently advertised, whereas there were 5 applicants for the 5 positions on the committee, whereas all 5 applicants were selected to serve on the committee, whereas these positions are subject to the approval of Student Senate, be it resolved that Section 1, the following individuals be approved as members of the Kansas State University Student Governing Association Elections Committee for the 2020-2021 term. Kathleen Cowell, Ashlyn Gillespie, Sarah Haggard, Jessica Hutchings, and Matthew Swords.
Are there any questions or corrections for the author on Resolution 42? Cox Leader Phillips had one about an and should be added to line. Oh, yep, I see what you mean. Yep, I got it. Any further questions or corrections? Seeing none, I'll now seek a motion to approve Resolution 42 unanimously. It's been so moved by Chair Booz, seconded by Chair Rodriguez. Are there any objections to approving Resolution 42? Seeing none, Resolution 42 will stand approved. Thank you, Ashton, for reading that. With that, we will now move into, oh my goodness, where are we on the agenda now? Oh yeah, committee reports. Sorry, that was a lot more legislation than we usually have earlier on. With that, we'll now move into committee reports. Are there any committee chairs who would like to give a report this evening? Chair Booz, you have the floor.
Yeah, hello everyone again. This will be kind of my last committee reporting on the elections changes that we've been making. You'll notice that we've introduced another bill with elections changes this week, as well as the 2 we introduced last week. So that's Bill 23. And so that should be all of the elections changes that we're going to make, since we want the elections regulations to be consistent while candidates are actually running, and the election season starts pretty soon after we get back in January. We're going to kind of move into a little bit more of looking at overall governing documents in a more free-form way. So if you have any comments on the governing documents and like random changes you want to see, please send them my way. And yeah, and then we're also still working on appointing people. So we got arts and sciences student senators in, which is amazing. And so the last college we have is agriculture. So we're still working on that. We might not appoint anyone next week, however, since that's the very last week.
I almost unmuted the wrong thing again. Are there any questions or corrections for Chair Booz? Seeing none, are there any other committee chairs who would like to give a report? Seeing none, we'll now move into directors' reports for tonight. Are there any directors who would like to give a report? Please type it in the chat. Sorry, I'm just trying to stick to it so that way I don't favor one way or the other. Attorney General Ashton Hess, you have the floor.
Awesome. So you all are going to see a piece of legislation from the Code Review Committee later this evening. And I just kind of wanted to offer a little context since that committee's finally, closing up shop, and to kind of let you know what happened this past semester. And I'll give you more information next week when we debate it. But essentially, that committee's kind of closing, and we're continuing on work on the judicial bylaws, as well as kind of our website and presentation. We've been looking at a lot of other schools and to kind of see like how they frame it, to see what work we can do at K-State, clarifying. So if you're interested in doing any of that work, if you really like bylaws and stuff, or you're really interested in like website design or marketing or any of that, reach out to me, because we're looking for people to kind of continue on with that work. So it'll be low key. I think we're going to try and meet over winter break, just over Zoom, because that's a pretty quiet time for school schedules and stuff. So let me know, but that's just something that we kind of have on the burner for judicial / the code review.
Are there any questions or there's no corrections, it's a report. Are there any questions for Attorney General Ashton Hess at this time? Seeing none, thank you for your report, Attorney General Hess. Are there any further directors who would like to give a report? Speaker Pro Tempore Billman is requesting that people fill out the Senate shout-out form. That is her report for tonight. Any other reports from any other directors or positions in SGA? Seeing none, I have a short report this evening on two different things that I have been a part of this week, just to give the body some updates. So starting tomorrow is a pretty fun and interesting thing that I'll be doing. As speaker and one of the co-chairs for the Tuition and Fees Strategies Committee, I'm going to be serving on a new tuition and fees task force. So this task force is specifically meant to, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, what is our tuition and fees model and what does that look like? I know that the resolution that we passed a few weeks ago is definitely going to be the talk of the town within this group. I'll be with this task force until April, which is when they submit their final report. So depending on the timeline, it might be after our current Senate term is up that the final submissions are made. The goal is to get them done in April so that any changes we make have to be approved by the Kansas Board of Regents before the end of the current fiscal year in next July. So I'll be able to provide you all some updates on that and some new tuition and fees work moving forward. The other update I have is an update on Faculty Senate and the Spring Wellbeing Days. So this past Tuesday, Faculty Senate votes on, for some context on how changes to the university calendar work, all changes have to originate in the University Calendar Committee, which has to approve any changes. Those go to Faculty Senate for approval. Faculty Senate must pass them. Then they go to Provost Tabor, who must approve them. Finally, those changes have to be voted on and approved by the Kansas Board of Regents. So it's kind of a process to change the calendar. For any new senators or people who weren't around, about a month ago or so, Student Senate passed a resolution requesting that we have 2 well-being days in the spring semester, and we requested that those be Mondays. So I believe it was the last Monday in February and the first Monday in April, because that just chunked up the semester into thirds. So we'd have multiple 3-day weekends. That went to the calendar committee where it passed unanimously. Provost Tabor was very in favor and told us that he supported our recommendation. University registrar, as well as the vice provost for enrollment management, were all very supportive. However, Faculty Senate met on Tuesday for their once monthly meeting, and Faculty Senate rejected the proposed calendar. It was a vote of about 35 to 46. I see some people in Wildcat Chamber with some big reactions. I've missed that part of Student Senate when people reacted to things. So yeah, I know that some people are upset about that news, and to tell you that I am upset would also be an understatement. I think my Tuesday was pretty muted. Tell and I are both voting members of Faculty Senate, Student Body President Whitmer and I guess I should say. And so he and I tried to argue pretty heavily for this. And so when it failed to pass, we were pretty surprised. I believe the provost was surprised, Dr. Lane, the Dean of Students was surprised. We did not expect the pushback that we ended up getting, nor that to fail. The good news is that I do think Faculty Senate leadership realized that this was not the direction that the other members of our shared governance system wanted. And so this afternoon, there was a joint leadership meeting of University Support Staff Senate, Faculty Senate, and Student Senate. During that meeting, we discussed a number of possibilities. We discussed pretty extensively what Student Senate and the student opinion is moving forward, and tried to address Faculty Senate's concerns. There's going to be a very small task force that is meeting tomorrow afternoon. So that includes a Vice President Lundeen and myself will be at that meeting tomorrow afternoon, as well as I think like 2 representatives from Faculty Senate and then a representative from University Support Staff Senate. And the goal is to come up with a joint proposal that all bodies will approve. I don't know what that will be. There was a lot of different ideas that were being discussed during the meeting on Tuesday. And I thought some of them, I think that Senate exec, when we went more into it, can tell you that we felt that some of Faculty Senate's ideas could potentially blow up in their face in terms of like COVID safety and everything like that. So I don't have anything specific to give back to you at this time because we still haven't decided what that's going to be. However, I do want to let you know that there's another group of members of Senate exec that we're planning on writing a resolution over this coming weekend. We were going to make some pretty harsh requests of Faculty Senate. With this new knowledge from today's meeting, the new plan is to hopefully come up with a solution that everybody likes, but I would still like us to pass something next week so that the 60 of you still have the opportunity to like vote and give your approval, yes or no on that. So be on the lookout for a resolution next week. I have no idea what it's going to contain. So please don't ask me for specifics at this time because I don't know what we're going to come up with tomorrow. But if you have questions on the process procedure side of it and like past events, I'd be happy to answer those. So I will conclude my report at this time and open it up for any questions that people have. Make sure if you're in the room and you have a question, put it in the Zoom. So that way I can, again, treat them equitably. So it looks like first question came from Senator Hutchings.
Okay, wait, so I just need to clarify. So we have a potential of not getting those 2 like mental health relaxation days next semester?
So because Faculty Senate voted to not approve it, at this time, the calendar contains no breaks and we would go from, I believe it's January 25th is the first day to like May 8th or whatever that is. So yes, you're correct. As of right now, at this very moment, there are no breaks in the calendar for the entirety of next semester. Yeah. Looks like next question is from Senator Harmon.
What were some of the concerns that Faculty Senate was listing?
Okay, so the question, if anyone couldn't hear it, was what were the concerns that Faculty Senate had? And I would say that their concerns could be grouped into 2 main concerns. The first ones brought up were the fact that they felt like 2 different weeks would disrupt lab classes to like labs or like once a week based classes too much. There was a concern that if you, for example, like have to cancel the Monday section of a lab, what do you do to the rest of that week? They're now off from everyone else. And if you do that 2 weeks, that's really going to mess up individuals in that lab. My response to that is we've had to get used to creative teaching instruction, and that I think that that's not a concern. Senate exec, when we drafted our resolution, knew that that would be brought up. And I think that overall, the Senate Executive Committee was of the opinion that we can find solutions to that. The second biggest concern was still travel. They felt like having weekend-related days would incentivize travel for students, and that students would be more likely to leave Manhattan, come back, and still bring COVID-19 with them. That is where a lot of the discussion has like laid. Some people, for example, objected to 2 different times. So in today's meeting, there was discussion of like, should we just have one like long weekend? But then is that closer to spring break? And does that defeat the purpose of canceling spring break at all? So there was a lot of discussion about like what is best for student travel related purposes. And I think that that was the bigger concern that swayed more people in Faculty Senate, which was why they voted against it. It looks like the next question is from Senator Grills.
Yeah, I know you just listed a few of the other options that they were thinking about. Can you list like more?
Yeah, so the ones that were discussed in Tuesday in particular, so the ones that people said they would have preferred when we were at the actual voting and meeting, the ones that were discussed included having just like weekdays off. So like a Wednesday off this one week and then a Tuesday off the next week. Or the other main option was one faculty senator proposed having a dead week in the middle of the semester. So essentially like you would have no graded assignments due, but classes would still be held during everything. Noodle on that and think how you think that would go, but Senate Exec had some thoughts on productivity and what student engagement would be during that time. So those were, I think I've by now covered all the different possibilities that have been discussed. There are some people who I'll be honest with you, don't want to change anything at all as well. So yeah. Next question, Caucus Leader Diaz de Leon.
Yeah, Senator Grills asked my question.
Okay, perfect. Senator Grills asked that question. And then, Caucus Leader Phillips said that, yeah, they can't really hear. So yeah, I'll keep repeating questions just so everyone can hear it. Are there any other questions at this time? I believe I'm caught up in the chat.
Should we unmute ourselves when we ask questions?
No. I just got a question. Should the senators in Wildcat Chamber unmute themselves? The answer is no. That's how we get that horrible, horrible feedback. So no, keep your computer totally muted. Are there any further questions? Time for questions has just expired. So unless there's any further questions, we will move on. Seeing no motions or no further questions, we will continue on. I just want to double check, are there any other directors who have a report to give? Seeing none, we will move on with our agenda for tonight. We will not be having college caucus time tonight, so we'll be moving into final action. The first item for final action is Bill 18. Will the author of Bill 18 please unmute themselves or come up? Sorry, who's the author of Bill 18?
Bryce.
Oh, Bryce. Okay, sorry. Bryce is coming up in Wildcat Chamber. Sorry. Have any changes been made?
So we made one change in Senate Ops. Oh gosh, I can't remember where it was. It was basically just a wording thing though. I would encourage everybody to vote positive on this bill. Basically, we're just clarifying all of the preventative measures we're taking when it comes to campaigning on social media, campaigning over official KSU, SGA media, endorsements from colleges or from staff officials using their positional power to endorse somebody. And we thought that amendments were necessary to clarify these rules and these activities. So I would encourage everybody to vote positive on this bill, and I stand for questions.
Are there any questions for Caucus Leader Atchison about his debate in favor of Bill 18? Oh, Chair Booz just wanted to clarify the change. Yes, Chair Booz, you can do that.
Yeah, I mean, if you'd like clarity in the change, I have an external monitor to this side, so that's why I'm looking over here. It's on line 34, we changed platforms to accounts in particular. And so really what the change was, the reasoning for it was because like really like SGA wouldn't technically have an official platform because like platforms, at least in our mind, is mostly like the actual website such as Facebook or Twitter or having the website as a whole. So accounts made more sense.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any further questions for Caucus Leader Atchison about his debate? Seeing none, is there any debate in the negative on Bill 18? Is there any additional debate in the positive on Bill 18? Is there any additional debate at all on Bill 18? Seeing none, we will now, Caucus Leader Phillips has moved to bulk roll call Bills 18 and 19. We have not done this very much. So I need a second on that. Seconded by Caucus Leader Carlson. So just to clarify, a bulk roll call means that we'll just vote on two things at one time. So we would vote on Bills 18 and 19 together. Are there any objections to bulk roll calling Bills 18 and 19? Seeing none, we will bulk roll call both of those. So we'll move into a vote after we debate Bill 19. With that, will the author for Bill 19 please come forward?
Hi, everyone. So basically this bill, again, is talking about clarifying vague language within the election section of the statutes. And so what this is seeking to clarify is who is allowed to endorse and who isn't allowed to endorse. But mostly we added who is allowed to endorse just so that because in years past there has been some discrepancies amongst others about who isn't allowed to endorse, especially in the age of social media. So I definitely encourage you to vote yes on this bill. It's always good to clarify those languages and to leave things so that there's no room for interpretation. So yeah.
Are there any questions for Caucus Leader Garrett about her debate? Seeing none, is there any debate in the negative on Bill 19? Is there any debate in the positive on Bill 19? Is there any additional debate at all on Bill 19? Seeing none, we will now move into a bulk roll call vote on Bills 18 and 19. So I'm going to turn it over to Speaker Pro Tempore Billman. On this, since it's a bulk roll call, please remember, and since we have some new senators, I'll just go over a few things. So please remember when voting that you have 4 different options. You can vote yes or no, you can abstain, and you can pass if you aren't sure how you would like to vote and you'd like to see how everyone else votes. Those are your options. Additionally, since this is a bulk roll call, please say like yes to all, no to all, or if you have differences in your votes, say like yes to 18, no to 19. Capiche? Is everyone good on that? Okay. So with that, I will now turn it over to Maggie for the bulk roll call vote.
All right. In addition to what Speaker Bothwell said, don't forget to vote for your proxies. So Atchison.
Yes to y'all.
Bain. Thank you. Booz.
Yes to all.
All right. Brown.
Yes to all.
Bruce. sorry. Brummett,
Abstain from vote.
Bruno, Burke, Carlson,
Yes to all.
Carr, Clements,
Yes to all.
Colburn,
Yes to all.
Croslow,
Yes to all.
De Santiago, Diaz de Leon,
Yes to all.
Delavu,
Yes to all.
Doc,
Yes to all.
Fox,
Yes to all by proxy.
Frederick,
Yes to all.
Gallardo, Garrett,
Yes to all.
and then Glasscock. Okay, cool. I have a chat for that one. Grills,
Yes to all.
Gomez,
Yes to all.
Hamlin, Harmon,
Yes to all.
Hurd, Heimerman,
Yes to all.
Hutchings.
Yes to all.
Oh, excuse me, Hernandez,
Yes to all.
Jambunathan,
Yes to all.
Kidd,
Yes to all.
Levi,
Yes to all.
Loya,
Yes to all.
Manners,
Yes to all.
McKee,
Yes to all.
McVeigh,
Yes to all by proxy.
Muthukumar,
Yes to all.
Noel,
Yes to all.
Nunning,
Yes to all.
Panikatu,
Yes to all.
Yes
Phillips,
to both.
Porter. Thank you. Purdy,
Yes to all.
Richenberg,
Yes to all.
Rodriguez,
Yes to all.
Rossi, Shears, excused, Shunjay, Snyder Ben,
Yes to both.
Snyder Blaine,
Yes to both.
Watts, Vogelmore,
Yes to all by proxy.
thank you, Wallace, Ward, Wells, thank you, Wilcox, thank you, Willis Jackson,
Yes to all.
Willis Reese,
Yes to all.
and Windholtz.
Yes to all.
Okay, excuse me just one sec while I make a couple changes.
Is there anyone who is missed? If you were missed, just put so in the chat right now.
Okay, seeing none in the chat, Bills 18 and 19 both pass 47-0 to 1. Thank you, everyone.
With that, we will now move on with our agenda with Bill 20. Will the author of Bill 20 please come forward? Have any changes or corrections been made?
Yes, there have been a few corrections. Most of them are just changing wordings of whereas clauses, but to give specifics, on line 49, we added in specific numbers for student salaries. On line 55, we stated CMG saves approximately $15,000 a year by reducing printing to 1 week. On line 69 through 76, we made some wording changes to the whereas clauses, but none of the spirit of the bill is changed. And then in line 85, we added, the Privilege Fee Committee believes that the combined savings from reduced printing services and student compensation spending justifies a 13% decrease to CMG's operating budget while still providing quality services.
Is the right version on the agenda right now?
So, okay, she has I made a document with all the changes, so the line numbers are off because stuff is crossed out, but all the changes are correct.
Okay, so the changes were correct in that, but the line numbers that were referred to were different. So I worried that I had messed up the agenda, so thank you.
Sorry.
Okay.
No, it's my
Thank
fault.
you. Thank you for clarifying that, Blake. With that, Madison, you now have first right to debate in the positive on Bill 20.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So this is a bill decreasing the Collegian by 13%. Their new allocation would be $344,000. The Collegian funds the Collegian magazine, the Royal Purple, as well as Manhattan. So I know that this is a large decrease and something that might be a bit uncomfortable, but through research and debate, the committee decided that this was the best decision to make sure that students are getting the best value for their dollars. A few areas I want to focus on are decreased students, Collegian compensation structure of their compensation, as well as printing. From fiscal year 2017 to fiscal year 2020, the amount of students that the privilege fee assessed decreased by 13%. This first means that the Collegian Media Group is servicing less students overall, justifying less funding. Oftentimes, in responses to decreasing CMG, people will say that this will lessen opportunities for students' professional growth. And while professional growth and experience is a great addition that we get from funding privilege fee entities, it is not the main goal of the privilege fee. Through this decrease, CMG will still focus on paying the leaders of their publications, but eliminate compensation for writers. This compensation structure aligns well with peer institutions and other K-State entities, such as UPC, SGA, and many more, who provide value to this campus with the majority of their members not being compensated, or some with no members being compensated at all. The next reason I am in support of this decrease is due to the current expenses spent on printing. With advancements in technology and more students using their phones for news, not as much value is being received from printing multiple times a week. I believe that students will still be able to receive great value from the Collegian with a printed version of the Collegian once a week and increased coverage, increased online coverage, which the Collegian is already doing in response to the current pandemic. When we look at where students on campus gain value, I don't think that they gain value from, I don't think they will lose value by decreasing things such as printing and printing less pages than Manhattan. I believe that this decrease better aligns student dollars with where they may receive benefit and will still allow students to get great benefit from CMG. I now stand for questions.
Are there any questions for Privilege Fee Chair Brown about her debate? It looks like Senator Bruce has a question.
Hey, Senator Brown. I'm wondering, did you speak with anyone from the Collegian before proposing these budget changes? I don't know if you're the author of this bill, but like rather than forming this opinion, have you spoken with anyone at the Collegian?
Yeah, so the way that the privilege fee does their review process is each entity will come in and give a presentation, and then we will do a question and answer portion.
So the Collegian gave us a presentation, and if you would actually like to view that, it will be on OrgSync under the Privilege Fee Committee documents, and then there should be a subsection that says Collegian Review. So they gave a presentation that essentially talked about, one, what they do, what their purpose is on campus. They gave a general funding of the services that they provide, as well as they went over some things such as revenue, expenses, and then they gave different scenarios based off of what their possible funding decreases would be. I have it printed out, but there's a really great slide on that basically gives a breakdown of the changes that they would make based on differing percentage decreases. And then we also had a question and answer session with the Collegian. They were able to bring in their director as well as some students. And so, yes, we were able to have multiple conversations with them.
The other thing, Senator Bruce, I'll grant you your follow-up, but the one thing I want to clarify for anyone, again, since we have new senators with us tonight, is that unlike the privilege fee changes that we have done multiple times this year already, those changes were ones that we chose to do as an SGA. This Collegian review is standard for this year. So the Collegian was set to be reviewed, and then the Privilege Fee Committee recommends whether they want an increase, a continuance, or a decrease. So this isn't like us adding the Collegian, like pulling them out of cycle or saying that we like we're specifically like picking on them this year. This is their standard review. So you'll see standard reviews on other privilege fee entities this year, which will include Lafine, counseling services, et cetera. I just want to make that clear. It kind of just hit me right now that we've done a lot of privilege fee stuff, but none of it it's all been our choice. This is the first regular privilege fee thing that we're doing. So I just wanted to clarify that for everyone right now. But Senator Bruce, your follow-up is granted.
Yes, I was wondering if you could clarify how much we are saving with the privilege fee, like the dollar amount for students if we were to cut the Collegian's budget this semester.
So you currently pay $472.50 for the privilege fee. That is something that will not be changed by this because there's a fee that is assessed by the amount of students we have as well as our total privilege fee budget. So I would not expect that currently you're gonna see a reduced privilege fee next year, but this will be overall reducing the privilege fee budget, which is currently at around $15.9 million. This would be reducing that budget by $50,000. And so while that might seem like a small amount, I will say we have had around a $300,000 deficit the past few years, not including this year, which is much worse because of COVID. But one of the goals that with this larger decrease is that we are looking and hoping to decrease that base budget, which is going to mean that hopefully mean that the fee doesn't have to increase as much because we're better aligning we're reducing our spending essentially to better follow the patterns of reduced enrollment that we have. But you will most likely not see a difference in your fee on cases.
Are
Okay,
there,
thank you so much.
okay, sorry for interrupting. Are there any additional questions for Chair Brown? Senator Brummett.
With the once a week printing, would we get like a Sunday edition size Collegian then? Instead of just like a normal one issue?
So the question was, if they move to once a week printing, will it be like Sunday size, like once a week edition?
I am not familiar with what a Sunday size newspaper is. Does that mean that it is larger?
Yeah, it's like,
okay.
You got like a bunch of different sections. You got your culture, your art appreciation. Yeah. So it's like the normal paper is this big. The Sunday paper is like this big.
Okay, cool. I cannot 100% say what the Collegian would do, but I do not believe that it would be like a quote unquote larger issue. Previously, so last year before COVID hit and decreases were made for fiscal year 21, they were printing 3 regular quote unquote issues a week. This would most likely change it so that they would be printing 1 regular issue a week. And then I believe that they would be doing online engagement for other areas, but it would not be like a larger Collegian from my understanding.
Are there any further questions for Chair Brown? Seeing none, is there any debate in the negative on Bill 20?
A quick correction.
Sorry, it looks like I'm getting a correction from the audience. So Cameron, what's your correction?
The one correction I see is on line 78. It was referred back 8.
Yes, that was my bad for not correcting that on the agenda when I put it together. So yes, there was a correction from the audience. Just so everyone knows, the Privilege Fee Committee voted 9-2. Oh, I see. Okay, I see what the issue is here. So if you're looking at the agenda, you'll see on line 78, it says that the committee voted 10-0 to recommend this budget. That was the initial recommendation of the committee, like when they immediately voted on the budget, like 3 weeks ago. To like review our legislative process, like things typically a lot of legislation starts in committee, goes to student senate, goes back to committee for a week, and then comes back to Senate to be voted on. So the first time the Privilege Fee Committee made this decision, they voted 10-0. But when they referred it back to us, their vote total was 9-2 for a favorable recommendation. So that means 9 of the 11 members thought that Senate should vote yes on this. You can see those recommendations on the agenda each week up at the top. So I'll have that right now. But if you see where I'm screen sharing right now, I should be highlighting favorably 9-2. So those are actually 2 different figures. Thank you for asking to clarify that, Director Koger. So I will go back to the bill, and then I wasn't paying attention. So is there any debate in the negative on Bill 20? Is there any additional debate in the positive on Bill 20? Is there any additional debate at all on Bill 20? There is additional debate, sorry. There's not additional debate? I'm just trying to clarify.
I'm trying to message it in the chat, but
Yeah, message it right now. You
Yeah.
got my attention.
just send it and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, put it in the chat and we'll get it worked out. Proposing it, yep, so you can just propose an amendment by doing it. So you didn't have to wait for debate or anything. You could have just gone for it. It's okay, it's okay. Miscommunication. So it looks like Senator Grills would like to propose an amendment to Bill 20. Senator Grills, do you have that amendment like written out already? Could you please email that to both myself and Parliamentarian Arnold so that we can display those on the proper screens? And then since it's your amendment, you'll have, I guess that needs a second. Is there a second to an amendment? I see a hand raised by.
Second.
Okay, there's been a second in Wildcat Chamber. So with that, we'll now consider the amendment. We'll get it pulled up here in just a sec. And then Senator Grills, since it's your amendment, you will have first right to debate. Just want to clarify, can people on the Zoom see the amendment? No, I'm getting nods. People on the Zoom can see it. Okay, so, and we're getting it pulled up in Wildcat Chamber on the big screen. So Senator Grills, you are welcome to come up to the podium for first right to debate on this amendment.
It's gonna be a little.
Whenever you're ready.
Do you want me to wait till it's pulled up?
It's on the other monitors, so
Okay.
it is pulled up somewhere.
Yeah, okay, so can everyone hear me? Great, okay. So the only thing that I'm amending, only thing, pretty controversial, changing that 13% to a 10%. So line 75, changing that 13 to 10, and then 94 through 96 amounts for the following fiscal years would be $356,000. You can read on from there, but basically, a 10% cut allows for flexibility, whereas a 13% cut will restrict them from competing with other state institutions. They are doing well now with a 13% cut from that insufficient funds clause, but this is not a sustainable choice for the CMG. I wouldn't call a 10% cut a large opportunity for growth, rather more of a continuance from what they're doing right now. This would give them the opportunity to invest in audio and visual equipment along with software. And this is not a luxury upgrade, rather necessity equipment to digitalize the CMG. This allows them to save money from printing, but also produce the same amount of quality content through a more accessible platform. I support a decrease in funding, but 13% is too harsh. Keep in mind that we have a 13% cut right now with the insufficient funds clause due to COVID-19. We should not be making the exact same cut and choice for their long-term budget for the next 3 years. This will strangle the Collegian Media Group as a whole. A 10% cut would allow for an extra $10,000 of wiggle room with that audio visual equipment upgrades and their software programs. This allows the opportunity to better align student dollars with student government's values and wants. Thank you.
So right now, are there any questions for Senator Grills about the amendment that's on the floor? It looks like Chair Booz has a question. Chair Booz.
Yeah, thank you for posing an amendment. I was just wondering why we need to have the Collegian be competitive with other colleges as opposed to just providing a service to students here.
Chair Booz, can you repeat your question? It was just a little muted in Wildcat Chamber.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, is this good? Like,
yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I was just wondering why we need the Collegian to be competitive with other colleges as opposed to just providing a service here that serves students.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Biz, we actually spoke with David Levy, who is running the CMG right now, and some other officials with the Collegian Media Group. And making our newspaper and print competitive, first of all, brings more students to our institution. Because of our strong journalism program, we are gaining more students, which increases the amount of money that we get for the privilege fee and tuition. Also, staying competitive is important because that gets our name out there as a university, and I think that's really important as well.
Okay, thank you.
It looks like there's another question in the chat from Senator Hutchings.
Hi, I'm not sure if you can answer this or not, but if we do make this change, would this cause us to have to like take money out of another organization's funds, or would it be just like from another source?
Yeah, so Senator Grills, let me know. I can answer this one. So this is changing. So this is a little bit different, again, because we're doing a regular privilege fee review, not the insufficient funds like budget cuts that we had to do in response to COVID about a month ago. So the proposed legislation tonight is changing the base budget that the Collegian would get for the next 3 years moving forward until their next review. So tonight, you're not voting on the amount of money that the Collegian has this year. You will be voting on the amount of funding that the Collegian receives out of the privilege fee each year for the next 3 years. So you don't have to worry about finding like another source to fund this. This is essentially student senate and student government's decision to decide like what value we see the Collegian brings to campus and what an appropriate dollar amount is to fund them. So does that answer your question?
Yes, so much more sense. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, this is a confusing year for privilege fee because we've had to do stuff very not normally. So like, just so everyone knows, what we're doing tonight is like a normal privilege fee review. Like we would typically do like 5 or 6 of these a year. So Just want to make
Also,
sure that's clear.
I was going to build off that question just a little bit, and that's why I'm also leaning towards that 10% rather than 13%, because this is for the next 3 years. This is not for right now, thinking solely about COVID. This is hopefully in a post-COVID world where this is not all we're thinking about financially and we are better off. And so, yeah, that's why I think 13% is way too harsh and we're only thinking about COVID in that light.
It looks like there's another question in the chat from Caucus Leader Carlson.
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering how you came to the decision to go from 13% to 10%.
Shoot, there's a really good answer to this, but I don't remember what it is. Can I defer this to Max? Do you want it? Well,
In full disclosure, I'm gonna debate negative next.
no, I want you to come up here and explain how you determined the 13%, and then I'll tell how I wiggled that down to 10.
Yes.
You got it.
Right. Do you want me to do, like, that was gonna be like a big piece of like my debate is like explaining the 13%. So like,
That's
I
fine.
can-
What I will say is, so we came up with the number with the 13%, and that basically is the furthest that we can possibly cut them while they still produce that quality, while they still produce content in the same mass amount, just not through printing. And so I think with the 10% cut, that would allow them not opportunity for growth per se, but the opportunity to, you know, you have to update that software in those programs that you have on the computer, and audio and visual. There's a lot of different things that they need to be able to do that they wouldn't have the opportunity to do if we strangled them with the 13.
Yeah, and just so everyone is aware, the difference between a 13 and a 10% cut is about $12,000. So the Collegian would have an extra 12,000-ish a year that they'd be able to have. And I see your follow-up, so I'll grant it.
Thanks. So just to clarify, the extra 3% you would anticipate giving them better like audiovisual and website equipment, and that would pretty much cover their like what they'd be able to use with that 3%, correct?
Madison wants me to defer to her.
Hello.
Hello. So I have the presentation that the Collegian sent us in front of me. And so just to get a little bit of a better identification of what the difference between this 13% and 10% could possibly look like. Granted, this is like something that hasn't been decided yet. And so this is all just information that we were given. The Collegian still has the opportunity to do whatever they want, but some of the things that they wanted to do were purchase audio and visual equipment, which they have currently put on hold due to COVID restrictions. That is something that they would continue to put on hold if they received this 13% decrease. They might receive additional opportunities to purchase that with this additional $10,000, as well as make a few changes for staffing. So it would be an additional $10,000 per year, and the specifics would be up to them. But I would suggest, we can't share screen, right? I would suggest you go look at the presentation that is on OrgSync, because it's very helpful having a visual of all of this.
I will say, just to build off what Madison said a little bit, the 13% cut, with this, we're obviously forcing them to print only one time a week. And I think the committee as a whole, we are all in favor of them printing only one time a week because of how expensive it is to print. But with this new focus on digitalization and all of it being online and sent through K-State Today and other opportunities like that, not giving them the opportunity to have those good quality visuals and audio equipment would just put them at an extreme disadvantage when we're already forcing them to print once a week. So I think that really highlights the importance of that equipment way more than any other year.
Are there any additional questions for Senator Grills about the proposed amendment at this time? Seeing none, I will now be seeking debate in the negative on the amendment. So just to clarify, I am looking for someone who would like to debate against what is currently being screen shared on the Zoom. So it looks like Senator Harmon has negative debate. Senator Harmon, you have the floor.
There we go. Perfect. Thank you so much, Speaker Bothwell. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to come up here and shed some light on how the committee arrived at that 13% number, some of the factors that led up to that. And so after I transition out of that, then I'll let you know when I'm transitioning into Mac's opinion time about why we should be keeping that 13%. So just for some numbers, that continuance for the Collegian is $395K. The 13% decrease brings that down to $344K. So that is total, we're reducing them by $51,000. However, in the committee, going through their reports and their presented budgets and everything, we found two main sources of funds that really led to our decision to arrive at this 13% number. One of those is the reduction in printing that's been talked about, and that adds up to about $14,000. We got a direct response from the leaders there about how much money they save from printing once a week. And then the other big chunk of that is $40,000 saved on student compensation. And that is actually from all before any adjustments were made to their budgets due to COVID. So we have a breakdown of their budgets from fiscal year, their 20 actual spending, going into fiscal year 21, this current year, before COVID adjustments. So thinking about it in terms of their normal budget, they budgeted $172,000 approximately for student salaries. However, we found that their actual spending the year before in fiscal year 20 was only about $129,000. And so we found that they were already had a little bit of underspending in their student salaries. This was before the decision to reduce student compensation for first and second year contributors. So that adds up to about 40K, and that's how you get to a number of 54,000 of unused funds that the committee really honed in on. And if you remember what I said at the beginning, we're only reducing them by 51,000. And if you add up the spare change on some of those savings within the budget, the bare bones, if we cut the Collegian bare bones, like a previous speaker mentioned in a debate, that would actually be a 15% decrease. And that was definitely discussed in committee and was brought up as one of our original proposals. But in committee, we talked about it, and I eventually arrived at the number of 13, along with many of the other committee members, to leave them some of this extra money, totaling about $6,500, like in our mind, hoping to go towards some of the purchase of that audio-visual equipment. And so that's why I stand before all of you, requesting that you vote down this amendment in the long-term interest of both the privilege fee and of student dollars. Us being able to really find these funds with a 13% decrease, that $50,000 decrease that can hopefully go towards addressing any potential future deficits is really huge. The Collegian Media Group is one of the only privilege fee entities that's above 100K, and us being able to find 50,000 about that we can recoup for students without having a major negative effect on the quality of services provided, I think is massive and is an opportunity that we really cannot afford to waste. And so based on all these numbers and all the research that the committee was able to do, we were really lucky to be able to dive into all of those. And I think we're really fortunate to be able to have this 13% decrease recouped for students without being able to reduce the quality of services by the Collegian Media Group. Changes that were already made due to COVID, things like the printing, those are already happening. And then we also already mentioned some of the benefits, giving them the ability to focus on online content. Overall, I think 13 is a nice medium that we can strike in between saving students money long-term and still preserving the powerhouse that is the Collegian Media Group. And so based on all of those, I'm very happy with the 13% number, and I urge all of you to vote down this amendment tonight in the long-term interest of students, and while still feeling good about preserving the ability of Collegian Media Group to serve our campus like they have so well before.
With that, are there any questions for Senator Harmon, Senator Grills?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, so you said that there's 40K that they are not spending on student salaries, that deficit there. Do we know if that money is being moved elsewhere?
So
Or if it's going unused?
So the question was, it was mentioned that there was 40K not being spent on student salaries. Are we as student government aware if they are just not spending that this year, or if they've reallocated and decided to spend that on something else? So Senator Hartman.
So we actually do, we have that revised fiscal year 21 budget. And so that's with the big callbacks we got from the insufficient funds process that we went through this spring and fall. And so a lot of those like reallocation of funds, when we actually look at that revised fiscal year 21 budget, we see that it comes down very conveniently close to their fiscal year 20 actual spending, whereas their priorly unadjusted fiscal year 21 budget was 172,000 like before. That revised budget comes down to 130,000, just a little bit above by about 1,000 or so above their fiscal year 20 actual spending. And so the narrative that presents to me is that those funds were truly just being underspent, and when they evaluated their budget having to do with the callbacks, that's a place where they found that they could save money. And overall, I think that is also a place where in the overall budget, that was 40K that wasn't being used. And therefore, I think it's a great opportunity for us to be able to recoup that for long-term students. And yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Are there any additional questions for Senator Harmon? Senator Loya has a question.
Yeah, I want to ask about the deficits that this is supposed to contribute towards alleviating. Exactly, I just want to know more specifics about the deficit. I think it was mentioned it was like $300,000 before, and this would go $50,000 towards the way. And then, what's the actual consequence of having a deficit?
Yeah. So I'm sure Nate and Madison might have more to add on after me. But traditionally, before we were really hit hard by COVID decreasing the amount of privilege fee students paying into the fee collections, traditionally for the past years before that, we had 2 or 3 or more years where our traditional deficit of the privilege fee was about that 300,000 mark. And so in the years way before COVID even, enrollment has declined, and that has led us to just not being able to collect the amount of privilege fees we need to be able to fund our entire budgets that we're giving out to these entities. So reductions like this are in line with that deficit. Consequences of that deficit, every year we have to cover that by taking funds out of our bond surplus account. And so that is an account of money that gets drawn in order to make sure we're safe covering our bond covenants. But if we have to continue to do that, it's certainly not sustainable long-term. We have to keep a minimum amount of money in bond surplus. And Nate, what are the consequences if we aren't able to cover our privilege fee allocations through bond surplus?
Well, so I guess like the explanation, I'd back it up a bit and say that like the way the privilege fee works is it's kind of like a loan. So we tell all of these entities at the start of the year, hey, like you get however much for your budget for the year. We expect that enrollment will be a certain number, so we'll be able to pay you the specific amount once everyone is enrolled and pays the university for the year. It's almost like a loan, but it's not the entity paying us back. We're making our money off of enrollment. And so that issue for the past few years has been we've consistently had declining enrollment each year from year to year. So our projections have been off. So we've ended in a deficit. Ending in a deficit like once or twice is not that bad. In years where we undervalue the amount of students who'll be on campus, we actually collect more than we need. And so that extra money goes to our debt reduction account for us to be able to pay off that debt in future years should we need it. So there's not necessarily like a major consequence year to year necessarily. The past few years, we've had plenty of money to cover that. But because we've had debt for multiple years in a row, it's really started to strain the amount of like extra funding that we have in reserves to cover things. And I think that that's particularly on everyone's minds this year. particularly because we're already projecting at the end of this year to take $2 million out of our bond surplus account. That account currently has almost $5 million in it, but that'll be like one of the largest withdrawals we've ever made. So the whole reason I think that people are concerned about the deficit is that if we continue to have a deficit, or if the impacts of COVID continue to impact us from year to year, soon, like if we end the year in a deficit, like we as like K-State SGA will have to like take out a loan or like find some other source of funding should we deplete our reserves. And additionally, that'll force our hand and we will be forced to cut the privilege fee, not have like the opportunity at our discretion to do it. So that's thinking like long-term, but I would say that so that's like thinking like a long-term planning model. So Senator Loya, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. I'm glad I was able to offer that explanation for you. Are there any further questions for Senator Harmon? Seeing none, I will now seek debate in the positive on the amendment. So I'm looking for someone who would like to say, yes, this should be 10%, not 13%. Looks like Chair Rodriguez, you have the floor.
Hey guys, I wanted to come up here and tell you a little bit more about the Collegian and how good they are. So maybe that will persuade your minds into voting yes for this amendment. The Collegian was named one of the top 5 collegiate newspapers for 4-year universities this past October. Also, the Collegian, the Royal Purple, My Happiness, all of those are some of the most decorated collegiate publications in the state of Kansas. They're putting our name out there. They really are working a lot to make sure that the information, the publications that we have are really worth our time. And I've seen that, like I read them probably every day, like I read at least 1 or 2 articles every day. They truly are doing the service that they promote to the university, but they're going above and beyond that. So I really believe that they should only get 10% instead of 13%, because it's just like they keep working for it. Not because they are able to work with less money means that we should keep like diminishing their resources. So yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to say today.
Is there any questions for Chair Rodriguez? Seeing none, is there any additional debate in the negative? It looks like Caucus Leader Phillips has debate in the negative. You have the floor.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. First of all, it's great to see everyone back in Wildcat Chamber. This is fantastic, or at least some of us. So touching a little bit on what a previous speaker talked about, talking about the value of the Collegian, the Privilege Fee Committee as a whole absolutely values the Collegian. I think that personally, I think that they're an absolutely great service, and they've done a fantastic job, especially in the midst of COVID. However, when we look at specifically what they've been doing this year, it's been fantastic, and they've been able to do this with essentially a 13% budget cut. If you take their insufficient funds decrease amount, it's about a 13%. So essentially the 13% that was proposed originally is a continuance of the post-COVID funding amounts. And so a couple of things that I'd like to point out when we're talking about a 10% versus a 13%, I think it's important to note that each entity ultimately decides what they're going to spend their money on. And because of the impacts of COVID-19, as Max mentioned earlier, there's so much room for savings with the Collegian. One of the previous speakers mentioned the audio and visual equipment. First of all, this would not have happened even at a 10% decrease. You can look at the presentation and you'll see that this equipment would still be on hold even if the amount were to be cut by 10%. So moving them up to a 10% really does not have a lot of benefit. And additionally, they're able to determine if they want their money to be spent on this. If this is something that the Collegian truly prioritizes, then they are able to spend their money on that. They can just move it around in different ways. Additionally, when we look at the job of the Collegian, as a previous speaker mentioned, talking about being able to compete with other schools around the nation, really the job of the collegian is to serve the student body rather than, be competitive with other institutions. While that is important, the student body is what the privilege fee committee focused on the most. This is why our impacts of printing costs and the different things like that were taken into consideration, and why 13% was our decision. Additionally, when we look at the assessment of the privilege fee since 2017, bringing that deficit discussion back into consideration, the assessment of the privilege fee since 2017, right about when enrollment started going down, has actually gone down about 13%, which happens to line up with the original decrease amount with the collegian. And so I really think that that 13% rather than the 10 is the right number, because it goes perfectly in line with our enrollment decreasing and how much we've been collecting with the privilege fee. Additionally, I'd just like to point out a little bit about a general review from a privilege fee. Every entity is going to come in. No entity wants to be decreased. Obviously, everyone has a claim to their money, and rightfully so. They all provide great services to our university. However, we can't just nickel and dime every single entity that comes in and, give a little bit here and there, or else we're going to end up giving a lot more than we're wanting to and not saving as much money nearly as we need to. And so, really, I think that a 13% rather than the 10% is good. I think that this 10% should be voted down because we have a great allocation that was thoroughly vetted by the privilege fee committee at a 13 that is still on the table if this amendment were to fail. So I would encourage you all to vote no, and thank you very much.
Are there any questions? It looks like Senator Grills has a question.
Okay, so I know that you talk about proposing very ambitious cuts for this year's full review cycle. Do you feel like this is going to make the future review cycles, the entities that we're not reviewing this year, very unevenly budgeted?
Sorry, I have to repeat it for those in the Zoom just in case. So the question was, it was mentioned in the speech that there's a discussion of like decreases overall for the coming year. Would this decrease like essentially be like uneven or unfair to like other entities that are going to come through
For the other year.
for the remainder of this?
Years.
Or compared to other years of review, since like there's certain entities that aren't reviewed this year.
So I guess I have two different approaches to a response for that. First of all, I guess that's just kind of how the privilege fee review cycle works. We only take it 1 year at a time. This whole reviewing every single entity in the privilege fee has only been a thing since this last year due to our insufficient funds clause. And so really, just based on the 3-year review cycle, it's going to be a little bit uneven, until each entity is up for review. Additionally, I think that this is somewhat of a precedent that needs to be set, just because even before COVID-19, we were taking $300,000 out of bond surplus. I believe 2 years ago it was 700,000. Correct me if I'm wrong. That might be wrong.
That was a little high.
Okay, a little high, but still, basically, we are essentially promising more to entities than we are able to give if we don't have that bond surplus amount. And so I feel like in a time of decreasing enrollment, we should theoretically be offering less services and giving less of an allocation, because we essentially aren't able to pay that out without emergency funds, which is not good financial practice.
Thank you.
It looks like there's another question from Chair Colburn.
Yeah, you mentioned that the difference between a 13 and a 10% cut to the collegian is not very great. What is the difference to the privilege fee overall budget between a 10 and 13% cut?
Yeah, so Max, that was about $12,000, correct?
I think, yeah.
Yeah, so roughly $12,000. I will say that amount is essentially from what I believe Max called the unutilized funds. And so really, basically that amount of money is able to help the privilege fee account while it is not essentially being utilized by the collegian, I guess. So we really don't see, there's not really a negative impact in my mind from cutting that versus putting it to the privilege fee savings essentially, or future potential savings.
Did that answer your question, Lily?
Yeah.
Okay. Looks like Senator Grills, clarification.
Yeah, I would just be careful about calling it unused funds. I think it very.
Senator Grills, I don't mean to cut you off, but this is getting a little debate-like.
Is that not what? Okay.
Yeah, so if you have debate, I'd invite you to come back up a second time. No, it's okay, it's okay. But you're just getting a little debate-like. Clarification is meant to be like specific information that we did not have. So you had something that was a little more subjective. So, but if you want to make that a second debate, I would invite you to come back up again. With that, are there any further questions? Looks like Director Koger has a question.
I know that in the actual legislation, it mentioned that there were 20% of the paper locations were not necessarily pertaining to campus. Can you kind of speak towards that and how much that costs?
So the question was, in the original legislation, it mentioned that there about 20% of like collegiate drop-off locations are off campus. So an explanation on that was requested.
Yeah, so basically, I went through and did that math. We got, it was like the route information from the collegiate, and approximately 20, it was either 28 or 20.8. I don't remember off the top of my head, but those locations are not affiliated in any way with the university. They're places like McDonald's, Hy-Vee. And so really, the point of that being in there was due to, the purpose of the privilege fee to serve students specifically rather than just the Manhattan community. And so while I think that having a community relationship is important, a fee that only students and all students pay for, I feel like should primarily benefit the Manhattan community. So that's how we got that and why that was in there.
Are there any further questions? It looks like Chair Colburn has another question.
So this is the amount of money that comes from the privilege fee for CMG. What outside funding does CMG get and where does it come from?
Yeah, so one of the outside source of funding that they mentioned primarily was ad revenue, which is the primary reason why physical printing is so important to the collegiate. If you do the math based on, okay, so basically with their physical printing, they are able to, yeah, go ahead and give that to me, Madison. I want to make sure that I'm correct on those exact numbers here.
Time for questions has expired at this time. Is there a motion to extend for more questions? It's been moved to extend by 5 minutes. Sorry, we need the exact time amount when we do this. 5 minutes by Chair Rodriguez. It's been seconded by a number of people in the chat. Are there any objections to 5 more minutes for questions? Seeing none, Coxleader Phillips, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you. So yeah, the specific information on advertising income. So looking at the print advertising, and this is from June 1st to September 30th of this past year for all of these numbers I'm about to give. So the print advertising went down from $10,387.50 to $7,433.07. However, because the collegiate moved to more of a digital format in the midst of COVID-19, their online social media advertising sales went up from $2,306 to $4,488.38. If you want to look at this at an overall perspective, as far as like net gain loss, there was approximately a loss of about $900. A couple of things that the committee felt on this, there wasn't a large sample size specifically from that. And also there's potential opportunity with more of an online focus to gain that ad revenue back. But also the fact that not every other entity has like other outside sources of funding was something that the committee took into account.
It looks like Chair Rodriguez had an additional question in the chat.
I was going to clarify in addition.
Unless Coxleader Phillips wants to defer. Sure. Okay, so sorry. Senator Harmon wanted to clarify a bit more on that point.
Just something to add. It's not a direct source of funding, but one major piece is that the lead administrator for the collegiate, his salary isn't paid 100% through the collegiate. He also gets paid for doing teaching and his normal job over with the School of Journalism. So that's a big source of funding that isn't funded through the privilege fee.
Okay, Chair Rodriguez, I believe you had an additional question earlier, so I'll toss it back to you.
Blake, you mentioned that 20 or 28% of the deliveries of the newspaper are not on campus specifically. Do you happen to know any of the addresses or places where these newspapers are being dropped off? Because personally, I know that we get in my sorority every Friday, so that still is going to students.
Yeah, so Madison, if you have that, in that calculation, included Greek houses as affiliated with campus. That 20% number is basically if the drop-off location is in no way affiliated with K-State, such as a McDonald's or a Hy-Vee or like somewhere in Aggieville, different things like that. But when I made that calculation, if I saw the opportunity for students to get that, I went ahead and included it in that greater 80%. It is also on OrgSync or Org Central under Spring Roots. And I have specifics if you'd want them, but that's like, at least for Greek houses, that's where that came from.
Are there any further questions for Caucus Leader Phillips at this time? Seeing none, we will now move into, I'm looking for debate in the positive. So is there debate in the positive on the amendment at this time? It looks like Chair Colburn has positive debate. And Senator Bruce, can you clarify if you have positive or negative? And I'll put you next on my list. Okay, perfect. So Chair Colburn, you have the floor.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I just wanted to speak today a little bit to the loss of cutting the Collegian by this extent. I think that it's important to consider the context of the loss when considering this amendment, even though the difference between 10 and 13% might not be huge, and I might personally be in favor of even less. I'll kind of get into all of this, but I think we really need to acknowledge the loss that's going to come from decreased Collegian services. And I would argue that we're seeing now, kind of the crux of my argument is one that has been stated by previous speakers that I absolutely agree with, that just because an entity is surviving during a once in a lifetime crisis doesn't mean that we should force them to continue operating under that budget amount. State legislators did this exact same thing to public education after the 2008 financial crisis and the budget shortfalls. I'm sure that you all probably saw teachers lose their jobs in your districts, fewer paras, and many different ways that your school district was affected. We see it to this day in higher education by paying increased tuition rates every single year because the legislature has yet to fully restore those cuts that were made during an extreme budget time, even as Kansas has seen drastic growth in its overall revenues. Higher education and public K-12 education continues to see these cuts. This is the same mindset that we have tonight with these cuts, saying this is a really bad time. And yes, COVID won't be done next year magically with the wave of the wand. Sorry, I had to bite my tongue there for a second. It won't be. And so I understand the need for austerity and the need for a 10% cut or, some kind of cut. But to treat the Collegian for the next 3 years in this emergency scenario and emergency mindset is just wrong. In a couple ways that I think it is compensation. I take some issue with the argument that Collegian employees should be considered as same as other compensated officers and employees under privileged fee entities. You have to have formal training to be a journalist, a 4-year degree. You have to take classes, you take them in high school, you take them in college to continually refine your skills. I don't pay $11,000 a year to be a chair of SGA. I don't pay $11,000 a year to be a senator and to be a senator for the rest of my life in a student governing association. If I'm honest with myself, many, if not every student could do my job with like 2 days of training. That is not the same for Collegian writers. We should compensate students for professional skills that they provide the university, this community as whole, and even to an extent, the state and I would argue nation. This is a disservice not only to Collegian students and Collegian writers and like JMC students, but students across the university when we say that you should not be compensated for professional skills that you provide us. I recognize that the difference between 13 and 10 will not increase student salaries probably, but at the same time, I think allowing wiggle room and not cutting them to this drastic extent is really important and why you should at least consider voting for this amendment. Additionally, when it comes to printing, personally, I have the Collegian website bookmarked. I honestly rarely pick up a printed Collegian. I check the website regularly, but that's not the same for every student. I know many avid Collegian lovers and readers who only pick up a printed version. By losing and going down to only one, and so losing 2/3 of their printed versions, this is a real disservice to students, and students will and have noticed an effect. I think that it's really important that we acknowledge this loss and continue to realize that in order to provide better coverage, there needs to be room for more technology improvements and so many other things that make the Collegian what it is. I'll also just add, the Collegian is really important to community relations. The community is who buys ads in the Collegian in addition to K-State entities and organizations. I see it and saw it all the time growing up, and it made me realize that the Collegian is a great news source even before I stepped foot on this campus. Again, I know a 10% instead of a 13 reduction doesn't compensate for all of this loss, but it attempts to, and I think you should really vote for this amendment because there are going to be real, and there are currently real impacts to students, both in CMG and both. It's expired. You should vote for it. I've made my point. Stand for questions.
Are there any questions for Chair Colburn? Question from Caucus Leader Phillips.
I guess Lily can't hear me. Yeah, Lily, you mentioned, specific losses that are felt at 13%, but not 10. Can you elaborate on those a little bit?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I didn't mention those. I still think that it's in context of this debate. I'm not saying that the Collegian is going to be able to compensate its writers as it has in the past or go up to 3 editions with this amendment. But I think when voting for this amendment, senators should have more context of why the Collegian doesn't deserve a full 13% cut. I don't think that we should just go straight into voting for an amendment. I think there needed to be more context in why the Collegian shouldn't receive a cut to this extent. So yeah, to answer your question, no, we won't get those things back. And I think that that is a real disappointment and a real loss to campus that we won't have those things back, but you should still consider them when voting for this amendment.
It looks like there's a question from Chair Booz.
Yeah, Lily, thanks for your debate. I just had a question regarding the actual decrease, what level is fully appropriate in this situation if we do have a deficit?
That's part of the reason why I wasn't going to propose an amendment myself. I had talked with Chair Brown just about my feelings on this and had kind of realized that I'm not in those privilege fee conversations day in and day out. And so I don't have the full picture like the priv fee does. I still think it's a job for individuals to kind of critique them, but I don't have an amount. I know that Senator Grills came up with this amount by looking at technology fees and other things like that. So I didn't want to say, oh, we should cut them only 3% because that's really arbitrary. I couldn't make really a data or evidence-based cut. Or continuance point in the fact that we are facing the deficit. I think that some cut is necessary, but yeah, anything I came up with was going to be really arbitrary, so it was pointless. So that's why I'm supporting this.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any further questions? I believe I'm caught up. Seeing none. Okay, going back, I've been writing down everyone who has indicated they have debate. So next in order, I have Senator Richenberg with negative debate.
Yes, I'm deferring my speaking rights to Jansen.
Okay, so yeah, Senator Richenberg is deferring her speaking rights to Jansen Penny.
Thank you, Senator Richenberg. I just want to address a few things that I've heard from previous speakers. One of those has been kind of the insinuation that we are here in this situation in the middle of a pandemic and in a budget crunch, and this is why we're making these very hard choices. Something that I want to point out is our enrollment peaked at about 2014, and ever since then, we have been in a big budget crisis. Us as Privilege Fee and as SGA just have not really stepped up to the challenge of, when we have decreasing enrollment, to really making some of those adjustments and changes that probably should have been happening for the past few years. And so that I honestly do not think that this is such a big extenuating circumstance that here in the next 3 years that everything is going to be good. I think that we're still going to struggle with enrollment, and that's something that we've struggled with for years. And I think this is the time to make some of those harder choices. Another point I want to bring up, a previous speaker mentioned one of the Collegian's goals. I currently serve on Privilege Fee as an at-large member, was bringing more audio and visual equipment and investing in that. That is something that I personally disagree with. There are 2 other entities that are funded by us as students on Privilege Fee that do just that. Wildcat Watch specializes in video, providing that opportunity to students and that value to us as students as well. And then we have KSDB, who does broadcasting as well as podcasts too. I do not think it is in the best interest of value student dollars right now to keep on investing in those audio visuals, such as video and podcasts and broadcasting, when we are already spending money on other entities that do just that. Think about it in a little bit of a different way. If you yourself have a Netflix account, Hulu account, Amazon Prime, and you kind of spread it out and watch all those, and you really need to watch your budget and you're really tight on your money, just like we are now, you are going to have to make a hard choice and only cut down to one of those. And so we do not need to be spending money aiding in those audio visuals when we're already doing that with our student funds. And so I think to best utilize student funds here, a 13% cut, I think it sustains all the value to students. And I do not think that I do not believe that there will be a serious decrease in the value that does come to students. Another previous speaker spoke about a great loss of value in reducing the number of printed copies. Something that I've definitely learned over the years is everyone here in the Zoom meeting are some of the most involved, most engaged here. And so yes, of course, all of our friends, or some of them might see a difference when they always go on that Monday or Wednesday to pick up that Collegian. But I do not believe that is the case for a majority of K-State students, and every K-State student pays for the Privilege Fee. So I'm in full support of a 13% cut. I believe there will still be a tremendous value to students, and I totally trust the Collegian Media Group administration and staff to be the best stewards of our money and bringing that value back to students who pay for it. And I stand for questions.
Sorry, I about almost did the wrong mute button again, guys. That's gonna happen sometime. So with that, are there any questions for Jansen Penny? Seeing none, next up I have Senator Bruce in the positive on the amendment.
Hi, everyone. Okay. I feel like we should analyze this in a couple different ways. From the first way, we definitely must understand that there are a lot of numbers being thrown around in this chat today. A lot of numbers, but one of the things that stuck out to me was how a lot of the numbers that were being thrown out about saving the money still could not make a dent in how much privilege fee that we will be paying as students. So with that being said, if this budget cut is not going to directly benefit the people in this room, we have to think about who it's going to consequence and who this is going to hurt. Being a multicultural student leader right now during a pandemic is almost impossible, right? And so facing budget cuts, facing administration that favors certain groups over another, when you're forcing student groups to find different avenues in which they have to be creative and, organize, it forces the student group to regroup, and it's not a fun task. And so let's talk about a couple other numbers that were thrown around. So we talked about how the Collegian had a deficit amount of spending. However, that's not specified to the actual budget itself. We could say that for the sake of conversation that the deficit was moved to a different spot. Maybe the salaries for the students were not paid. But we can't say that that money was not spent because it was spent by the Collegian. It was just spent in different areas. Furthermore, we don't know for sure where that money was relocated before I get questioned about that. Secondly, it's very easy just to tell someone to move their work from paper to electronic. But when K-State told us to move our work from paper to electronic this semester, you've seen how much we all struggled. So if you're asking a media group who primarily prints their papers to just move all of their resources online, it's not a very easy transition. It doesn't just happen in the blink of an eye, and it requires thought and creativity that needs money and budgeting in the case of. And so that's why I'm proposing that we do look at this amendment and vote in favor of this amendment, because a 10% decrease, although I'm in favor of a far less decrease, because the Collegian reports on multicultural affairs. It also has been really good about giving us the information during coronavirus when administration was lacking, giving us actual information. We could lean on the Collegian to tell us what was going on. Furthermore, we have the Collegian helping students share their voice when you see them being kind of targeted by the people who kind of blacklisted KS Unite. You can see the Collegian making a way for students to use their voice. And so if we were to decrease the amount of resources this kind of entity has, we're going to see a decrease in the amount of speech used. Finally, let's say we go with previous speaker's plan. CMD is much bigger than both of these two entities, so this is a flawed plan. CMD would require, if they were to move primarily on electronic basis, they're going to require more money and more resources in their own equipment. If the other two entities are using their equipment heavily, CMG cannot rely on the other two entities to pass down this electronic help. They're going to need their own completely separate technology in order to operate, because as previous speaker Rodriguez and Colburn mentioned, the Collegian is an award-winning entity. It has to preserve that right. Being competitive on a national stage only further legitimizes your school and gives you more pride for your school. And so I see no reason why we should not vote in favor of this amendment. Thank you. I stand for questions.
Are there any questions for Senator Bruce? Seeing none, next up for debate in the negative, I have Senator Clements, Caucus Leader Clements, excuse me.
Hi, so I'm also on the Privilege Fee Committee, but I did just want to clarify again that while it has been mentioned in debate that this is similar to a continuance of their post-COVID funding decreases, that wasn't what the committee considered when making this decision. We treated this as a regular review and really looked at the impacts that the Collegian Media Group has on campus, which are really positive impacts, and they provide great services. And then we looked at their budget and how it was being spent and how we can allocate funding appropriately. So when we looked at this decrease, we looked at it in terms of not COVID dollars, but rather we are in a term of decreasing enrollment where we have had continually, like multiple years in a row, several $100,000 of deficit. So when we really did dig into those numbers, we did look at those student salaries and how what was allocated to them versus what was actually spent was a stark difference. So we saw this as an opportunity to give them a cut that wouldn't actually drastically affect their services. Because while this may not decrease the privilege fee that we are individually paying as students right now, things and decisions like these have impacts in the future, because if we continually have $200,000 of deficit year after year, eventually like we run out of money and they have to charge students more if we don't cut this budget down. So yes, now our privilege fee is staying the same and we're moving money around and making it work. But if we continue to have decreasing enrollment and continue to have increasing budgets or even constant budgets, it becomes a time where we do have to pay higher fees, which is something that we would all like to avoid. And then I would also like to argue that we haven't really seen a big decrease in services from the Collegian Media Group. yes, we have switched to printing once per week, but students still have the opportunity and the experiences of producing a print newspaper, and they're developing their online media skills, which in the current environment and world we're living in is going to be constantly increasing. I was not previously a very avid Collegian Media Group reader or audience member, but since we've started getting those emails and more online articles, I've been able to actually read a lot more Collegian articles. So I would argue that other students are probably seeing a similar trend, and the Collegian Media Group is able to reach more students virtually than they were before with the print issue. So I think that wraps up my points, and I stand for questions.
Are there any, it looks like, so sorry, multiple things came in. Senator Bruce has a question.
Hi, I meant to touch on this in my debate, but question for you. If we were to cut the Collegian at 13%, does that mean when we have more entities come forward to SGA that we will be taking the same axe to their budget by cutting them at the highest amount that we can, or will we be able to be almost softer in our approach to their budgeting and allow them to have more money? If that makes sense. Sorry about that kind of weird phrased question.
No, I can only really speak on my personal viewpoint as a committee member and not the approach as a whole. But I am looking at each entity individually, and with the overarching goal in my mind of we do have a problem on our hands of our budgets are too high for the amount of money we're bringing in, and I keep that in the back of my mind. But when looking at entities, I like to look at places that we can cut without drastically impacting services provided to students. So I have no set agenda of I'm taking X% decrease to every budget or anything like that. It's mainly entity to entity, doing what we can to bring the privilege fee to a more sustainable model while also still providing quality to services to students.
Follow-up is granted.
So for the sake of conversation, can we say that other entities, when they come forward to SGA, that if we're also decreasing their budget, that we will have more money to work with versus going all out for the Collegian right now? Versus going all out for the Collegian right now, we could save more money with other entities' budgets being cut.
Again, I would just say that I'm not looking at I'm trying to reduce the privilege fee to a certain amount of money. To me, this percentage of the Collegian Media Group was more based upon the difference we saw in what was budgeted for things like student salaries and printing versus what was actually being spent, and less on I wanted to decrease privilege fee to a certain amount. So to me, whatever conclusion we come to on the Collegian Media Group has no impact on how I'm going to look at any other entity coming through for a review. Personally, as a committee member, I'm going to look at each of them individually and the services they provide to students and how their money is being spent.
And so I just want to remind everyone with questions, let's try to stay away from hypotheticals about future scenarios, just since we speculate. I think everything's been handled well tonight, but just as a reminder to everyone when asking future questions, try to stay away from those hypothetical future stuff and instead ask about the debate particularly at hand. So thank you to everyone. And it looks like Senator Hutchings is next.
This is just a clarification question for me from kind of anyone from the Privilege Fee Committee. Would the Collegian have an opportunity? Sorry, I know we just talked about not asking about the future, but would they have an opportunity in the future to ask for more money, or is it locked in for 3 years?
So I can answer this question, and this one's fine because it's a procedural one, Jessica. And so specifically, whatever budget we pass tonight will be presented as a contract to the Collegian. So myself, Madison, Tell as the student body president, the dean of students, the chief financial officer, and the director of the Collegian all sign this agreement saying that this is what it will be for the next 3 years. The Collegian will not be regularly reviewed again until 3 years from now. So during school year 2023, 2024. would be the next time that they're regularly reviewed. However, the privilege fee committee at any point in time has the opportunity to pull an entity out of cycle if they think that there's some reason that like there's something needs to happen. So the committee itself can vote to review an entity at any given time and give them that full 3-week process. And then additionally, let's say that there's like an entity experiences like a significant like budget crisis or like special thing. We as Student Senate do have the ability to offer like emergency allocations. That's kind of, it seems far off now on the agenda because we haven't made that much progress in a while, but we will be talking about that with Lafine later tonight in regards to like the test contract that they've gotten into. So we are able to like give them funding for like one-time things if we need to as well. Okay, glad that that answered the question. Any other questions at this point in time? Procedural question again from Chair Colburn. I'll be happy to answer that.
Yeah, sorry, this is just for like general Senate. So yeah, it's 9:27 and you guys have to get out of there by 10. Is there a general plan for like if we continue discussion on this, what happens to the rest of the agenda?
Yeah, so my original intention was to ask for a recess. I was gonna do that about like 9:45, 9:50-ish. But the other thing is we have some additional guests with us who I think I was gonna ask if we could just go ask the union. I'm just gonna see where we are in about 20 minutes. And from there, I'll inform the body about everything because we only have one bill that I expect to be non-controversial after this, seeing as we passed an equivalent one to it last week, and then just a bunch of introduction. So I don't think it'll just depend on how long it takes to finish up the collegian. I think we'll go from there and see what we need to do. So thank you for asking. But we'll just check back in about 20 minutes or so. So with that, I'm now seeking debate in the positive on the amendment. I do not believe that anyone else indicated they had any in the chat. So if you have debate in the positive, please indicate so at this time. Seeing none, I did have one more debate in the negative, and that was from Chair Booz. Chair Booz, you have the floor now for debate in the negative.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker Bothwell. As I'm delivering this sort of speech from the Honors House, I'm thinking of a pile of newspapers downstairs. That pile is probably about 40 copies of the Collegian from the past 2 printings. You know, the Collegian actually does deliver about 25 copies to the Honors House, and I'd say only about 5 per issue are picked up. You know, that's just one of the things that I believe that the Collegian could decrease in order to deal with this cut. And so that's partially why I do believe that we should decrease it by the Collegian by 13%. There's that reason, but then I also really want to start with my first major reason, which is student salaries. This is part of a response to a previous speaker. But yeah, SGA has about $60,000, probably a little more than that, of salaries that are only for leadership positions. So if you did not know, as the Senate Operations Chair, am compensated. On the other hand, the Collegian has $130,000 to $170,000. And Union Program Council, which was also name dropped by another previous speaker, does not have any salary at all for any of their members. You know, SGA has a lot of students who are here just because they're passionate. Even though I'm compensated my $430-ish a semester, are not why I'm doing this. I mean, it's because I'm passionate about this. And so, you know, while previous speakers would argue that we should be providing payment to people who provide services to the university, that is a lot of people in a lot of clubs. And I think that includes more people in SGA than we currently pay. I do not think, on the other hand, that we should be paying students to invest in their own professional development. As a computer science major, I'm expected to work on some projects outside of course outside of any course as part of my professional development. Go to hackathons, work on projects, that sort of thing. I don't get paid for that. I understand that that's part of my professional development, and if I want to be good at my job later, I should do some work on that area. I think journalism should be the same way. I think that if you're writing articles for the Collegian, like, I think it makes a lot of sense to say, hey, you're doing this as part of professional development and not necessarily pay them, and then just pay the leadership, because they're the ones that are putting in significant hours to facilitate it all. And so, like, I do not believe that is a convincing argument. I do not believe we should be paying for as much student salaries as we are. The second thing is really just the fact that we're having deficits. Like, you know, Bill 5 from this year, we cut the privilege fee by 200,000, and that felt like a lot at the time. Then we cut it by 2 million. Like, and if we hadn't cut the privilege fee by massive amounts, we would have needed to take $4 million out of our bond surplus, and we need to keep about 1 to 1.5 million in there. I'm not quite sure on the full number of that, which means that if we had had another deficit again, we would have been basically broke. Like, you know, I'm glad that we managed to figure out how to cut it. So, but the collegiate in particular does a history of trying to increase their budget. In fact, in 2017, they argued for an increase, despite the fact that it was just a continuum, giving them the same amount of money. And so, like, I believe that ultimately, like, a decrease makes sense due to salaries and due to their pattern of kind of arguing for an increase despite not entirely needing one. Finally, there's been arguments about how the collegiate is increasing the profile of K-State. First, I believe that they can do that with this cut. Yeah, I believe that we can do that with this cut. You know, they are still publishing online. They're still getting a lot of people involved to write articles and everything like that. Second, I also believe that that isn't a good justification for this. I think the collegiate is designed to serve students and give students information that we need to know, whether through Manhappening, whether through the collegiate, or whether through the yearbook. And, like, I think that should be their primary goals. And if they do well, that's amazing. We need to encourage that. But I believe that they can do well at 13% due to all the other negative speakers. So overall, based on possible decreases in printing, based on student salaries and how we shouldn't be funding all of the student salaries they have, the current deficit, and that we have other programs as well to put our name out there, I hope you vote against.
Yeah, for questions, it looks like Senator Hurd has a question.
Hi, good evening. From what I gathered, you stated that we shouldn't be paying students for something that's going to help their professional development. What makes that any different than what the JCOC report is, or what SGA positions get paid? Like, I'm confused on how SGA is supposed to be paid more in general compared to the collegiate. Could you kind of elaborate on that for me, please?
Yeah, I think my main point for that is I don't think we should be paying salaries primarily because of professional development. You know, the report for SGA and that sort of thing is basically trying to make sure that we have good qualified applicants for those positions, and that having to get a job isn't a deterrent for that. I could see that reasoning also applying to a lot of leadership positions in the collegiate. But until this year, the collegiate was also paying everyone who wrote an article, including at freelance rates. I believe it was between $5 and $15 per article. And so, like, and you know, I think the primary purpose for that really was professional development. And you know, but like I think that we should be expected to do some level of professional development for our major, and without getting paid for it.
Are there any further questions at this time? Oh, there's a follow-up. That's granted.
Hi, it's me again. Okay, so, I mean, I understand what you're saying, that because it's more of a professional development opportunity, that we shouldn't be responsible for funding collegiate, anybody who writes for the collegiate. I'm still not quite grasping why we can fund SGA positions, and that's our responsibility with the privilege fee and everything that students pay for, but we can't fund students who are writing for the collegiate. I know you said like,
yeah. I can, I guess, try to explain a little more on that. Like I kind of put SGA writers in the same category. Like, sorry, I kind of put senators for SGA in the same category that I would put writers for the collegiate. That is like, we don't pay any senators just for being senators, even though you do a lot of work. And you do it. And so like when I was a senator, like last year when I was both a senator and Senate operations director, like excuse me, I was not paid for my work. And then like, I was grateful that JCOC changed that. But, so like I did it because it was my passion. And so I believe that like, that it makes sense to not pay for writers who are doing it because either professional development or because they're passionate about it. And then it makes sense to pay the leaders of Collegian Media Group because that's similar to how we treat like committee chairs and executive and legislative leadership, because it makes sense and like in that way. So does that kind of make sense?
I understand what you're saying. Oh, I'm sorry, follow up.
You're fine. I was going to allow it. No matter what.
Okay, thank you. I understand what you're saying, but I don't know. It's just, it kind of baffles me that honestly, in my opinion, I know I probably shouldn't even go there, but
I was going to say, Senator Hurd, it sounds like you have debate that you want to give,
Never
which I'd
mind.
encourage you to make.
Okay, never mind. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
With that, are there any further questions? It looks like Senator Levi has a question.
Hey, Andrew. I was just curious. I wasn't previously aware that the Collegian compensation for student work included freelancing. Is that unique to the Collegian?
I'm not entirely sure. I believe that it is. Like, I don't think that our other media groups that we fund, like such as Wildcat 91.9, would be able to do that. Trey, like if you have that answer, I'd be more than willing to defer to you. So yeah, I mean, I believe at K-State that is a unique thing that the Collegian paid all of its contributors. And also, can I defer to Senator Harmon for more information?
Yeah, looks like Senator Harmon can answer that, so I'll pass it off to him.
Thanks, Chair Booz. I can provide a little bit of clarity on that. That was something we actually asked about during our review in the Privilege Fee Committee meetings.
It looks like time for questions has expired. Is there a motion to extend? Move to extend time by 5. I'm getting a 5. 5 was the first one that came in and was seconded. Are there any objections to extending time for questions by 5 minutes? Seeing none, time will be extended by 5 minutes for questions.
I definitely hope we won't need 5 minutes. That was clarified for the committee in our meetings. The Collegian shared with us, actually the administrator for the Collegian recently came to K-State from another institution and shared with us the fact that it's actually very unique that K-State pays its first and second year contributors and like freelancers for their contributions. At many other peer institutions, the norm is to be compensating those leadership positions, and for first and second year contributors to be compensated was to be considered quite out of the norm. So we did get to ask that and actually have a very clear answer on it.
Thank you, Max. Any further questions at this time? I believe I'm caught up in the chat. Seeing none, thank you for your debate, Chair Booz. I'd like to let everyone know that at this time, we have crossed the threshold for the motion to call the previous question.
Not debate.
What?
Not debate. Just asking for the floor when you're done.
Sorry, what?
Yes, in the chat. Keep going.
Oh, well, but we already have one more person who's indicated that they'd like to debate in the positive. At this time, I'm just letting everyone know that from this point on, the motion to call the previous question and close debate is now in order. So are you motioning that right now?
No, a different motion. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
There's a motion on the floor then. Never mind. What's the motion? Hasn't been made, so I don't know what to second.
Yeah, sorry. I move to postpone this amendment indefinitely, just because every time we've mentioned that debate is eligible to be closed. It's usually closed. Since we usually have a lot more debate, I'm making this motion preemptively to make sure we get to continue discussion.
Sorry, so can you clarify what your motion, the exact motion?
So the motion to postpone indefinitely means that we would be killing the amendment. So it would just be thrown out the window. That is a debatable motion.
Sorry, I'm gonna take over. I understand the intent of the motion right now, but in the interest of ease of understanding what is going on, I would just like us to have a straight up or down vote on the amendment at some point. Because I just think that that would be clearer when we get into this weirder stuff. It gets harder for people to know what they're voting on. So because we're just about there, I'd like us to stick to the straight up or down. And it looks like there was an objection anyway, but.
Point of order.
Can you do that?
Can I do that as the chair? I mean.
This is a debatable motion, so shouldn't we have to debate on his motion?
Yeah,
Was it ever seconded?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was seconded by Wilcox, but then there were objections in the chat. So.
To address that.
Okay, so I'm getting a lot of parla thrown at me right now, which is what I'm trying to simplify at this time for our body. And I'm also brushing up against a clock, which is not making this easy. Okay. Sorry, I'm really trying to think about how to process this. Max, I am going to overrule your motion and consider it out of order at this time because we specifically do not allow for amendments to amendments. I know this is not the same thing or identical, but I believe that the intention behind that is to, again, clarify what amendments are being made and what is happening to them. And so I guess if you want to make a motion to overrule me, which like takes 2/3, you can make that motion. But genuinely, like I think that for simplicity, we should proceed into a straight up or down vote because we're just about there, and people will know. Like, I think this is going to be close, and I don't want any confusion on people voting yes or no on what they're voting on. So I understand your intentions right now, but I'm trying to make sure that we get the exact will of Student Senate. So
I agree, as long as the debate isn't closed.
Yeah, and I'm letting everyone know that a motion is now, okay. So we've now solved this. I appreciate everyone's patience. Here's where we sit on things right now. The motion to close debate is now in order, but no one has made it at this time. There is still someone who has indicated they have positive debate, which is Senator Grills. There's no motion in the chat. So Senator Grills, you have the floor for positive debate at this time on the amendment if you would like it. So that's what I was trying to explain.
Okay, first off, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate all of the attention that everyone has brought to this amendment and the thought that you guys have all put into your debate. I think there's a lot of facts and a lot of passion behind all of it. I do want to clarify that CMG members are not paid for their first 2 years with this cut. So that kind of does clear up the air on a few things. So that makes it a little bit less controversial. Also, I understand that we need to set a precedent and begin cutting entities more than we have in the past. A 10% cut still sets this precedent. I don't think the precedent we should set should be to cut to the absolute highest extent that we can while they're still a functioning entity. $12,000 will get the Collegian a lot farther than the privilege fee with that $12,000 in our pocket. The print copy is also, that's been addressed as well, is not very well used. We totally agree as the privilege fee, and that is why we're still making this cut and pushing them to digitalize and all that type of stuff. Without this cut, they will not be anywhere near thriving 3 years from now, meaning they will be expecting a much larger increase rather than staying consistent. This 10% cut brings in more money for the privilege fee, while also allowing them to stay competitive and better digitalize their systems with these audio and visual equipment, along with software programs. This cut pushes the CMG in the right direction. I think there are a lot of facts and passion, like I mentioned before, behind all of these arguments. The CMG is a highly valuable service, and they will be able to operate with either of these cuts proposed, but they will be able to provide a lot more modernized outreach to the community with this 10% cut. Our world revolves around technology. We need to provide the Collegiate Media Group with the opportunity and resources to keep up with this world. We would not be doing them, we would be doing them a disservice by not allowing this 10% cut to pass today and letting them compete with other schools. Thanks so much, guys. Vote 10.
Are there any questions for the speaker? Are there any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, it looks like there's additional debate in the negative at this time. So Senator Harmon, you have the right to debate in the negative.
Yeah, you should work.
But he is now taking the floor.
Hello, everybody. Many apologies for the parliamentary confusion before, just trying to ensure we had a little bit less time to debate. And with that, I want to return a little bit to and address many of the questions that have been brought up during the previous speakers and provide a little bit of a unique perspective that only somebody who's really been in on these committee meetings and particularly, my passion lies in looking at these numbers and, to use a phrase a previous speaker used, to provide some evidence-based reasons for why we arrived at this 13% cut and to assuage some of the concerns about it and why we should not move to a 10%. Among some of those concerns, primarily among them is a reduction in student compensation, let alone these changes that the Collegian has made does bring them in line with peer institutions. Even before that, the crux of this piece of legislation and the crux of the committee's decision to arrive at a 13% is completely based on our finding of funds that we are able to cut without affecting that funds that were either not going to be used or had not been used in years past. I outlined those in my previous debate. That is that 14K in printing costs that is already gone by the Collegian reducing their number of printing to once a week. There are a number of arguments that that's actually a positive thing. I'm not going to rely on that too heavily. The main thing for us to mention is that that's already been done. And I think, in my personal opinion, there are a lot of positives going forward in the better use and allocation of student dollars not going towards 3 times a week printing. That's the first thing. But the other thing is this unused 40,000 in student salaries based on what we were provided with their fiscal year 20 actual spending on student salaries and their fiscal year 21 unadjusted and adjusted budgets. And the big question with that is we don't know that those funds weren't spent elsewhere. The thing is, we do. We have pie charts. And this is something I did fail to share in my previous debate. We have the entire budget of the CMG outlined. Almost in fact, every other expense of the Collegiate Media Group except travel is almost 100% fixed. We can compare the pie charts between the reductions of the insufficient funds callbacks post and pre those adjustments. And all of those things mentioned by the Collegian as the main pieces of their budget are things like depreciation, things like an institutional support fee, other operating expenses, and subscriptions, licenses, and registration fees. Along with that, in printing, their biggest expense by far is salaries and benefits, both for professional staff and then for student salaries. Comparing and contrasting those two overall budgets between the callbacks for the insufficient funds amount, the only slice of that pie chart that moved was printing and student salaries. Therefore, based on all of our analysis of their budgets and what dollars were and were not being used prior to fiscal year 21, that's where that 40,000 number comes from. And that is the key point to this debate, I think, that everybody, because it is a little bit hard to keep track of numbers and evidence-based pieces of debate, I think that's been lost tonight. And so I want to recircle this debate as we near towards the end to this piece of evidence-based debate and really drive home. That's why the Privilege Fee Committee arrived at a 13% decrease. It's not cutting them to the bone. That would have been the 15%. We considered that. We held back in order to give the Collegian some operating room to make sure we weren't limiting them to bare bones COVID level expenses, but also balance those priorities with the long-term sustainability of the Priv Fee. They still have a spare $6,500 just about in there, and hopefully that can go towards some of this audio and visual equipment. They're better in line with peer institutions and other K-State organizations in terms of student compensation. And this $54,000 that we're able to reduce, in my opinion, and I believe in what's the best terms, long-term interest of students, is being able to be recalled to the Priv Fee. Also, a point mentioned earlier in debate was that we don't know where that piece,
Yeah, your time's expired.
I'm not watching the Zoom.
Time's expired. Is there a motion to extend?
I move to extend the speaker's time for questions by 5 minutes.
So there's a lot of motions on the floor right now. I'm trying to keep track. So there's a motion to extend by 5 minutes that was made in Wildcat Chamber for time for debate. That's already been objected to and it hasn't been seconded.
You can't extend debate time either way.
What?
You can't extend debate time, only question time.
Oh, well, there you go. So, okay, so regardless, looks like time for debate has ended. Well, didn't know that. Did you really look that up right now?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
not right now, but I knew it before.
Okay, well, learn something new every day, I guess. So with that, I guess we'll just proceed into questions. I do see all the amendments or all the motions in the chat. I will revisit them once we have finished the current speaker, just so everyone's aware. So are there any questions at this time?
Oh my God. Look at the chat.
You have the stat.
Okay, well, Chair Booz is correcting us and he is Senate Operations, so I believe him. But looks like there was a second, but there was also an objection. Are you done? Would you give more debate at this point? Okay, so more debate would be given. So I'm trying to revisit everything. More debate would be given. So there was a yes, but then there was an objection. Because there was an objection, we now proceed into what would be a hand vote if we were in person. So if you are a student senator, please go into the participants window and click yes or no if you would like to extend Senator Harmon's time for debate. Yes, if you think time for debate should be extended, no for not. I'll let all the votes come in and then once it's done, we'll go. Since there was an objection, that's what we have to follow.
What does this have to pass by?
This would be just a majority, by my understanding. Yeah. So this is just a simple majority of those voting, too. So if you're abstaining, just don't select anything.
If we're a proxy, should we message you?
Yes. But it's a pretty clear margin by this point, so. I'm waiting for it to balance out. Okay, I'm going to call it at this time. I haven't seen it change. Oh, it did just change. Or as of right now, there's only 12 yeses and there's 23 nos. Those each should go up one because of the proxies I got. So 13 yeses, 24 nos. No more time for debate because everybody's ruled it. We're now in questions for Senator Harmon. Are there questions for Senator Harmon about his debate? I'm trying to finish everything on this and then get into in between. So there's a question from Chair Booz.
Yeah, so this is more just to clarify because this might be one of the last speeches. But yeah, was your point that basically the salary decrease likely would have happened anyway, or like they maybe wouldn't have used that money for salaries in the first place?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Sorry, I guess my microphone. Yeah, this is more to clarify, but like just to be sure, like, is it more likely than not that they would not have used that money for salaries in the first place?
I don't know. The only thing that is clear from the budgets given to us was that they were not using that money. So that when that was basically like it balanced back out when the insufficient funds clause bills passed. But their actual spending in fiscal year 20 was $40,000 less than what they had budgeted.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Senator Harmon, for your debate. I'm now going to return to the motions as they exist in the chat and follow up on them. First is a motion to take a 20-minute recess. While that debate was happening, I did ask Attorney General Hess, who's in the room, to check with the union if we could stay. Answer is
I texted him, he hasn't gotten back.
there's no response yet.
Like, I've had been in meetings here that have extended like into 1 a.m. and it's been okay.
This semester?
Yeah, and he just cared because he had to reset the room, which they don't have to do.
Okay.
As long as you do everything you said you would do, it's okay.
Okay, so I'm hearing that we should be okay for a little bit. I don't know if people are able to hear that. So it looks like we will be okay as long as we clean everything up here and everything like that. I personally believe we are nearing the end of debate, and this is the longest thing on our agenda for the night. Like, so once we get through this, we'll be done quickly. Chair Rodriguez, your motion was seconded, but since we know we're good to stay, are you willing to rescind your motion and take it back?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your proactiveness in trying to look out for those of us who are here in person. There was one addition, I'm just trying to follow everything as of right now. Senator Loya had indicated debate in the positive for after the coming positive speech. So there's a motion after the next positive. So Senator Loya, you have the floor right now, and then we will have the previous question called, was the way it was worded. So Senator Loya, you have the floor right now for debate in the positive on the amendment.
Okay, thank you. There was a couple points I wanted to make. First off, the previous speaker argued that we should return to evidence-based argumentation, and that, you know, it was evidence that leads us to arrive at 13% figure. Now, it's true that evidence indicates that that would be in line with the budget surplus, and that's not absolutely to the bone, but just because evidence supports those facts doesn't mean that evidence supports what we should do. That's more ideological. And 10% would be preferable because we want flexibility for that organization, I think. I think it's unfair to, in an imbalanced way, target their budget first when we're trying to catch up on this deficit spending, and instead of spreading it out more evenly among more organizations. So I think they need even more leeway than what they're given right now. Also, I'd like to respond to some debate from earlier, points that were made about we should not pay for the professional development of students, or they should not be paid for that. That, you know, that's something that pays for itself, or something along those lines is, I guess, the reasoning. And I think for me, that's just a mask for exploiting labor. I think to say it's akin to an unpaid internship telling you, yeah, you're getting experience. And I am not in agreement with that sort of argumentation. So that is my debate, and I stand for questions.
Are there any questions for Senator Loya at this time? There's a question from Caucus Leader Phillips.
Is being a student senator an exploitation of labor?
The question was, is being a student senator an exploitation of labor?
So specifically, and I'd like to clarify, I am currently not being paid. I know some are. So I think that question would be along the lines of the senators that are currently doing this and not getting paid, is that exploiting their labor? And that has to do with, are they creating value? I would argue yes, and maybe arguably that if this is such an important job, and we're providing value to the university, perhaps we should all receive a small stipend. But that's my ideological perspective.
This has come up multiple times. So I guess, again, we have new senators tonight. So to clarify everything, there are roughly a dozen officers in SGA that are paid. Myself as speaker is one of them. The average student senator does not receive compensation. The only student senators that do are student senators who simultaneously hold chair positions. So just so everyone's aware, that's like 3 people, like 3, 4, it's not that many people. And we have 60 senators and about 3 of them are paid. So just wanted to clarify that if it comes up again. Are there any other questions at this time? Seeing none, now the motion that is on the floor is a motion to call the previous question. For those who are unaware, a motion to call the previous question would move us out of debate and into a vote on this amendment right now. This is a non-debatable motion, and instead we just debate on it. We just vote on it immediately. So with that, I'd like to implore everyone right now to go into their participants window and vote at this time. You will vote yes if you would like to vote on the amendment right now. You vote no if you would like to keep allowing for debate at this time. If you have a proxy, please DM me your vote so I can include those in the total. Yes, and I believe it's 2/3 of who's voting. Yeah, so. Well, I don't know if everyone's been voting on every motion, so we'll just have to do the math at the end. Maybe not. Oh,
It is
Well, we can
2/3
see
as
it
it stands.
anyways.
well, also proxies aren't included in that at this time, so, no, you can't see the total from their side, only the hosts. So with that, hold on, let me add in the math, because it looks like it's leveled out now. I have 1, 2, 3 additional yeses to get to 30 and 1 additional no. So that is 30 to 11. So that should be good. Yeah, that should be fine. Because that gives us a total of 41. A third of that would be between like 12 and something. So they needed like 25-ish, I believe. So, and the yeses have kept coming in and the no's went down. So yes, the motion to call the previous question passes. We will now proceed into a, yeah. So thank you, Andrew. Yeah, we had 29 and then it flipped up, so we were good there. So we are now going to proceed into a vote on the amendment. So I just cleared the totals. So Chair Brown is asking, what does the amendment need to pass? The amendment just needs a simple majority to pass. So 51% of those voting. So at this time, please go into the participants window and vote again. Click the green yes button if you are voting in favor of the amendment. Click the red no button if you are voting against the amendment. Proxies, DM me your vote. Madison has a question.
Is this normally a roll call vote?
No, amendments would not be. Roll call votes are only on the bill itself, not the amendment. So we can just do this through the window. So again, if you're a proxy, please, Caucus Leader Phillips has moved for a roll call vote. Can you please rescind your motion?
It's close. It's gonna be close.
Yeah, and I have the ability to check it, but a roll call vote is just who makes it. So like I get a number, so it's not like the math's incorrect.
Sorry. Go ahead. Whatever.
Would you still like that?
Nah, I already rescinded it. We're good.
Okay, you rescinded it. Okay, and yeah, there's objections and stuff in the chat. So with that, please go in and vote at this time. Click the green yes if you want to lower the Collegian's decrease from 13% to 10%. Click the red no if you would prefer to keep their decrease at 13%. DM me your proxy vote. Things are coming in right now, so.
Sorry, Nate.
Take it more time.
I just don't want people to not vote because like they aren't called on, is basically the thought process behind it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, cause Zoom, you know, people can zone out. Yeah.
And people also, especially 10 people.
Dang. Do we have more? Yeah, we have more. We're good.
Okay, so it looks like it's leveled off at this time. There's 12 in favor.
Turn on the mic, Nate.
Sorry. Okay, so it looks like it's leveled off at this time. There's just regular votes, 12 in favor, 28 against, and then there's two additional yeses and one additional no. So the final vote tally is 14 to 30. The amendment fails. So the amendment failed overall. So the bill is still a 13% decrease to the Collegian Media Group. Let me move back to the actual bill. We now return to debate on the bill in its entirety on its own. So we only went through one round of debate before anything happened. So I am now seeking debate in the, let me get the agenda pulled up, but I'm now seeking debate in the positive for the original bill.
My turn to refresh.
Can I get a point of clarification?
Yeah, there's a point of clarification right now.
What would the course of action be if the bill were?
If it were to fail, the privilege fee committee would have to come up with something new during this year at some point. They would have to send us another bill. Thank you for asking that question. That's a very good one. They would have to submit something else to us at some point. Let's say hypothetically, they never did that during the entire year. If the Collegian doesn't have a contract, the Collegian gets $0. So we have to pass a contract at some point during this year since their current contract ends this year.
Thank you.
It looks like, is there any debate in the positive on the main? I got called for that and received nothing. Is there any debate in the negative on the original bill? Is there any additional debate at all on the original bill? Seeing none, we will now move into a roll call vote on Bill 20. So to clarify, you are now voting on the actual bill that the Privilege Fee Committee submitted. That bill includes a provision, that bill decreases how much the Collegian gets by 13%. This will now be a roll call vote at this time. So Maggie will go through everyone's name to get votes.
All right, remember everyone, your options are yes, no, pass, and abstain. Atchison,
Yes.
Bain,
Yes.
Booz,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Bruce, Brummett,
We're gonna go with a pass.
Bruna, Burke. Thank you. Carlson,
Yes.
Carr, Clement,
Yes.
Colburn,
No.
Crosslow,
Yes.
De Santiago, Diaz de Leon,
No.
Delavu,
Yes.
Doc,
Yes.
Fox,
Oh, yes, by proxy. Sorry.
sorry, Frederick,
Abstain.
Gallardo, Garrett,
Yes.
Glasscock,
No by proxy.
Grills,
Pass.
Grolmes,
Abstain.
Hamlin, Harmon,
Yes.
Hurd,
No.
Heimerman,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Hutchings,
Yes.
Jambunathan. Thank you. Kidd,
Yes.
Levi,
Yes.
Loya,
Nope.
Manners,
No.
McKee,
Yes.
McVeigh,
No by proxy.
Muthukumar,
Pass.
Noel,
Yes.
Nunink, Panikatu,
Yes.
Phillips,
Pass.
Porter. Thank you. Okay. Excuse me, let me go back up really fast. Okay, Porter. Okay, Purdy,
Yes.
Richenberg,
No.
Rodriguez,
No.
Rossi. Shear is not here. Shunjay, Senator Ben,
Yes.
Senator Blaine,
Yes.
Vance, Vogelmore,
Yes, by proxy.
Wallace, Ward, Wells, Wilcox,
Yes.
thank you, Senator Ward. I'm sorry, who was the last yes? Thank you. All right, Willis Jackson,
Yes.
Willis Reese,
Yes.
Windholtz. Okay, circling back around to passes. Brummett,
No.
Grills,
No.
Muthukumar,
Yes.
Phillips.
Yes.
Okay, is there anyone whose name I did not call?
Is there anyone who's missed in the roll? Seeing none.
Okay, seeing none, Bill 20 passes 32 to 12 to 2. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, that one's finished. I knew that'd be what would take up most of our time tonight. So moving on, we do have one more thing to still vote on tonight. I would like to remind everyone. That is Bill 21, the additional travel allocations funding. I don't think Carissa is on the call anymore. I know she was
I am.
earlier. Oh, you are? Okay, I couldn't
I have
find
been
you.
the whole time, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I searched by your first name, not your last name. I couldn't find you. Carissa, you have first right to debate on Bill 21.
Okay, and I don't have to read it, right?
No, you don't.
Okay. So this is, like I said last week, the very similar, actually it's almost the same as the on-campus allocations funding from reserves. We're taking $10,000 or wanting to take 10,000 out of the travel allocations committee reserve for contingencies account to be able to fund some organizations this year. I encourage you to vote yes on this bill. You'll see another bill in introduction tonight from the travel allocations committee for a request that we've already received. So we need this money to be able to allocate. I now stand for questions.
Are there any questions for Chair Jonak about her debate? Seeing none, is there any debate in the negative on Bill 21? Is there any additional debate in the positive on Bill 21? Is there any additional debate at all? Seeing none, you don't need to move the previous question. So previous question, yeah, so I can explain it since someone made it. Just to clarify, the motion to previous question moves us out of debate and into a vote immediately, but it is only in order, so someone can only make it after there have been 5 opportunities for each side to debate something. So that's why I always announce when we've crossed the 5 threshold when we get there. If there's no debate, we just move into a vote. So since there's no debate there, we're just gonna move into a vote already. So I appreciate your motion, but it's unnecessary and technically out of order. So with that, we are now moving into another vote again on Bill 21. So I'm gonna turn it back over to Maggie.
All right, Atchison,
Yes.
Bain,
Yes.
Booz,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Bruce, Brummett,
Yes.
Bruna, Burke, Carlson,
Yes.
Carr, Clement,
Yes.
Colburn,
Yes.
Crosslow,
Yes.
De Santiago, Diaz de Leon,
Yes.
Dillaboo,
Yes.
Doc, Fox,
Yes, by proxy.
Frederick,
Yes.
Gallardo, Garrett,
Yes.
Glasscock,
Yes, by proxy.
Grills,
Yes.
Gromis,
Yes.
Hamlin, Harmon,
Yes.
Hurd. Thank you. Heimerman,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Hutchings,
Yes.
Jambunathan,
Yes.
Kidd,
Yes, sorry, yes.
Levi,
Yes.
Loya,
Yes.
Manners, McKee,
Yes.
McVeigh, McVeigh,
Oh, yes, by proxy.
Muthu Kumar,
Yes.
Noel,
Yes.
Nunning,
Yes.
Panikatu,
Yes.
Phillips,
Yes.
Porter, Purdy,
Yes.
Richenberg,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Rossi, Sheer, Shunjay, Snyder Ben,
Yes.
Snyder Blaine,
Yes.
Vaught, Volgamore,
Yes, by proxy.
Wallace, Ward, Wells, Wilcox, Willis Jackson, Willis Reese,
Yes.
and Windholtz. Okay, thank you. Anybody whose name I didn't call? Cool. With that, Bill 21 passes 46-0.
Shocker, I know. I just want to remind everyone, we still have introduction of legislation. I know that everyone's tired, but we do need to go through it, because if we don't introduce stuff tonight, it wouldn't be introduced till next week, and then it wouldn't be voted on until after Thanksgiving and Christmas break. So we do need to get through it all, as much as everyone is tired. However, I will entertain a motion to allow all remaining authors to summarize. Cox Leader Phillips made it in, there's multiple motions. Cox Leader Carlson made the motion. It's been seconded. Are there any objections to allowing the remaining authors to summarize? Seeing none, we will now proceed on. Can I also have someone make a motion to just automatically consider everything?
So moved.
It's been moved by Cox Leader Phillips, not in the chat, but in Wildcat Chamber to do that. All the seconds are pouring in right now. Are there any objections? Okay, everything is automatically considered. It's on our agenda. it'll just be picked up and I'll alternate author to author as we go through, so we can be expedient now. So first thing up is amendments to the bylaws concerning the code of conduct. Will the author please come forward? She's been waiting so patiently.
Alrighty, I will keep it judicial branch and short and sweet. So I want to read names because these people have worked really hard this semester, and they should definitely be recognized for their work. And then I'll talk about like what we changed, and then I'll kind of talk about what the next steps are too. So Bill 2021-22, amendments to the KSU SGA bylaws concerning the Student Code of Conduct by Ashton Hess, Annalee Hobbs, Grace Wheeler, Brenda Hurd, Kara Bruce, Vedant Kulkarni, Abigail Archibong, Tyler Burns, Chelsea Arnold, Kaya Crocker, Michaela Ross, Nikayla Fleming, Miranda Urban, Chrissy Carr, Shaylin Ward, Bryn Carlson, and Logan Ragsdale. He's a student at Polytech, so, okay, perfect. So a lot of this is just generic stuff. Our stuff is found in Article 5, and every 5 years we need to do a code of conduct review. It's legislated, but there was also, as everyone knows, an influx of student support over the summer for the university to look at their student behavioral policies. And one of these, which President Myers outlined in his University Action Steps, was a review of the Student Code of Conduct. So it's just kind of a perfect year to look at everything, and I think take a lot of care when we review not only our Student Code of Conduct, but also our bylaws and how our judicial process works. And it's displayed for students. So we've been working really since July. We got our committee together and began the work. A lot of it and most of it was student outreach. So figuring out what students wanted, what pieces of the code they liked, didn't like, what they wanted to see changed. We did get back some feedback that was probably more relevant to other university work efforts going on. So we made sure to share that information, even if it didn't really fall within the code. So there's two pieces that still really need work, not necessarily with the code line items, but with the process around it. And we'll be continuing that work. We're looking at the bylaws, so our judicial process. And also we're looking at how our information is displayed. So getting that information to students. So, what does a conduct process look like? How long could that process take? You're brought in, what are my rights as a student during this process? How do I file a complaint? Like, those are things that need to be easy for students. And our survey also kind of got into that. And we've seen that a lot of students kind of don't know where to go, which is a huge issue. So we will continue to work on that. But to get our code of conduct updated, you'll notice the first change, if you jump down to, it enacted that. In section 3.1, we changed furnishing to providing and or supplying, just as a point of clarity. On line 2, judicial line 2, line 62, disruption or obstruction of was changed to conduct that substantially disrupts or interferes with teaching, research, etc. So substantially is a big piece of that. So, there's a mark that things need to pass. And we also rely a lot on our board. They determine what that substantially is. So that's just kind of like what we think about when we hear cases, but now it's legislated. Then you look at code line item 3, interfere with is changed to disrupt or interfere with to bring disruptions into that code line item as well. So these are all relevant things and kind of ways that we can do some work because we are bound by law in a lot of places. If you look down to code line item 15A, just a basic change of infringing, just a typo. Code line item 16, interfering with the freedom of expression of others was changed to engaging in conduct that prevents another person from exercising freedom of expression protected by law. Protected by law was something we kind of debated on, but it's in there to kind of recognize where our code stands with other things like the US Constitution. And if you look down to 19, you'll notice we cut out failure to comply with the sanctions imposed under the code, moved it to its own line item just because we deal with it a lot. And then that moved H up to G in 19. 21 was updated. Dr. Falcone served on our committee as well. And she brought a lot of kind of valuable input to this and kind of making sure that we bring this line item into where we are in our university today. So protecting professors' materials, especially their digital materials from sharing and stuff. And then the numbers change after that. So.
Yeah, before we get into questions, there was one thing that wasn't mentioned that I do want to clarify. these changes, the code of conduct, as well as anything like judicial related in the bylaws, requires approval, not just from Student Senate, but also from the Vice President for Student Life and from the Office of General Counsel. So it's kind of relevant because we had a lot of amendments tonight. This stuff cannot be amended unless those other groups agree to it as well. So Ashton's already done the legwork of getting this approved by those groups now. So they've already said yes to this. So now we're like the final step in the process. We're not voting tonight, but I did just want to clarify that before questions come in. But are there any other questions about the code of conduct changes? Seeing none, thank you so much, Ashton. We'll now move on to our next item, which is amendments to the elections regulations regarding campaign staff, social media, and other clarifications. If the author wants to come forward, you can summarize.
Yeah, hello again. So really, this is the last thing that we wanted to make sure that we got in, which was changes to how campaign staff and social media work. But so really, the justification for it is all but the last whereas clause. And then the last whereas clause was basically covering the things that I found, like section 1, where we actually have 8 colleges and a graduate school for a total of 9. Just like making sure to correct the minor things that are kind of weird in the statutes as well. So I'll just go over the major changes. If you want to talk about the minor changes, feel free to ask. So section 2 is the first major change. It's making sure that registered campaign staff for presidential candidates must not be paid for their work. And so in the whereas clause, really the idea for that was to ensure that registered staff are students who are truly invested in presidential campaigns, as opposed to students who are very good at doing something and therefore are paid for presidential campaigns and then are claimed as registered campaign staff in order to not need to report that on their expense report. So yeah, that's the idea. Then the other change is section 5. That's the other major change. So in previous years, presidential candidates and vice presidential tickets, they needed to report all of the campaign actions that occurred on the campaign action report. This was not a thing for senators. And that was just something that Senate Operations Committee had added last year. So this year, Haley Spellman, who was the previous elections commissioner, stated that this needing to include information on social media posts caused several violations and also didn't really help the elections committee to monitor social media. And so we wanted to make sure that you weren't penalized too much or any just for forgetting a social media post. So we ended up changing section 2 of part C of section 120 to clarify that it includes all campaign actions except for the exceptions, which is it does not need to include individual social media or group messaging posts, which group messaging is something like grouping or texting as well. So there's a few other changes. I don't believe any of them should be controversial. I'm open for questions.
Are there any questions for Chair Booz? Seeing none, we'll now move on. The next item on our agenda is Bill 24, a travel allocation to Pan-Hellenic Association. If the author wants to please come forward.
Hi, me again. Okay, so this is the Travel Allocation Committee's allocation to Pan-Hellenic Association. They presented to us this Sunday. They requested $3,000, but I'll remind anyone that doesn't know, we can only fund $100 per person for up to 10 people for a maximum of $1,000. They are traveling to, or not traveling, they usually would travel for this event, but it is being held online. So this is to cover their registration fee to the ALFB Central Virtual Conference, which lasts the entire month of February. They anticipate about 260 students will attend. throughout Greek life in the 13 sororities on campus, and I believe the 26 registered fraternities that are on campus. They go to this conference every year, and they're usually only able to take 10 to 15 people. And this year they're very excited that it's virtual because they'll be able to have way more people attend. This conference will develop leadership skills and expend their, sorry, I'm trying to remember everything that they said now. Just from what I said in the whereas clauses, it's going to build leadership skills, be able to expand perspectives, and the way that they plan to take this back to K-State is that most students that are involved in Greek life are involved in a lot of other organizations. So this will not just impact Greek life, but all of the K-State community. I now stand for questions.
Are there any questions for Chair Jonak? Question from Senator Grills.
Yeah, should I get a microphone? Or should I
Just say it and I'll repeat it.
Yeah, okay. She mentioned about how this benefits the whole community and that's why they're funding it. Can you ask her to elaborate a little bit more why we're funding Greek life that's unassociated with the university?
Yeah, so the question was, since this is like a Panhellenic thing and associated with Greek life, since they're technically ISO and unaffiliated with the university, why are we funding them? And I have stuff to say on that if we need more context. But Carissa, do you want to take a stab at that?
I can take a stab at that. So we fund a lot of Greek organizations, not like specific sororities or fraternities, but as I previously stated, most of the people involved in this, it's a leadership conference. It is not a conference directly proportional with benefiting Greek life and Greek life alone. It will affect the entire K-State community by being able to expand the things that they learn from this and take it to other leadership roles. For me, for example, I'm in a sorority, but also I'm an SGA. So if I were to attend this conference, I could bring what I have learned in this conference to other organizations such as SGA. Additionally, the lady that presented to us, Alexandria, she said that this is open to most, not just executive, but most people that are in Greek life. So it has a lot of outreach. Nathan, I don't know if you have anything to add.
So the thing that I was going to add is it specifically states in the policies and procedure manual that is about student organization registration, we cannot discriminate funding based on ISO, DSO status. We fund both ISOs and DSOs. So that the committee is tasked with evaluating funding based off educational value. They're not tasked with funding based off their registration status. So that was the part that I wanted to add. It looks like there's another question from Chair Booz.
Yeah, this bill mentions that it's the entire month of May, month of February. I was wondering how much each member is going to be doing during this time? Is it just on the weekends, or is it 30 minutes a day, or how is it set up?
Okay, so my understanding from what they presented to us at our meeting was that there are kind of like if you went to camp for the summer, how there's different events going on every day. It's kind of like that. And since it's virtual, you can kind of pick and choose what workshops you plan to attend. I also know that PHC will be facilitating a lot of these workshops. So they'll attend the virtual conference and then they'll Zoom or meet in small groups to discuss what they learned and take the activities further and make sure they're getting the most out of their experience. So that's another reason that so many people they're anticipating are going to be able to attend, because there's so many opportunities to learn from this event.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Are there any further questions? Is that a question?
Yeah.
Okay, it's not in the chat, but Senator Brummett has one.
All right. What are they gonna do to make up for the $2,000 we can't give them?
Yeah, so did you hear that, Carissa? It's what, is this organization gonna do because we weren't able to give them $2,000?
Okay, I know I wrote it down somewhere. I don't remember off of my head. I know that we asked in my committee meeting. Senator Hutchings knows. Can I defer to
Yep.
her, please?
Yep.
I forgot.
Senator Hutchins can take it.
I'm pretty sure Alexandria said that PHC has a separate budget for them, but I think it was more of like a rainy day budget, and there's not much in it, so that they were going to actually possibly pull money from that budget in case.
Awesome. Are there any additional questions?
Lily also said in the chat that they might just be able to send less people, like have less people get like the access code to these like events, which is also a possibility. The point is that they plan, we specifically asked them if like $1,000 would be like enough, like if it would just like go to waste. And they said that they would like be able to come up with the rest of the money.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Carissa. We'll now move on to resolution 43. I will just present this one right now. Wow, 7 p.m. feels like a while ago, doesn't it? When Ethan Erickson presented to us. But this is what he was talking about. And so I guess I'm just going to try to explain this as briefly as possible. So this is something that Madison Tell and I have been working with Lafine on. Basically, Lafine entered into a contract with a test producing company for COVID-19, but that company, due to back orders on how many tests people were asking for, could not deliver with tests all at once, immediately upon request. Instead, they are now delivering our order a 12th of it for the next 12 months. Lafine was planning on paying for that with some federal dollars that they'd received specifically to go towards testing. However, those federal dollars expire this December. If we don't spend them by then, the federal government's just going to take them back. So because of that, they still need a way to pay for these tests and to maximize funding on COVID-related projects for this year. So they're reallocating, they do have the ability to reallocate their funding on the tests to go towards salaries associated with Lafine. So they're now essentially paying a variety of salaries at Lafine Health Center for the rest of this year to use up all of that money. It's approximately $2 million. And then after that point in time, what this resolution will do is approve removal of funds from the bond surplus account to go to Lafine to pay for those tests. The really interesting wrinkle in all of this is that basically, when we did the budget cuts, we specifically added a clause to Lafine's contract in the last thing that specifically said any extra federal dollars spent on Lafine's operation will go to the bond surplus account. So this is basically a giant circle of money. I hate to say it's money laundering. It's not laundering because nothing's bad, but it looks like a circle when you diagram it out. And so basically the whole thing is that some of these specific dollars have specific associations on when and what they can be spent for. So we're just moving money around to ensure that we spend all of it by the end of this year. So there's no money being lost to any of our accounts with this legislation. It specifically says, I'll highlight it right now, in section 2, that the amount allocated for transfer will not exceed what they put into our account. So we're not, this resolution is very vague, but that's very vague deliberately. It's to ensure that we are able to give them the proper amount. Senator Kraslow, I appreciate your joke in the chat. So are there any questions on this that I can answer at this time? Is this clear to everyone that a week from now when you're voting on it, you'd know what you'd be voting on? I just want to make sure that it's really obvious, because this is a transfer of up to $2 million. So it is a significant amount of money, again, that we're moving. So I just want to make sure everyone's crystal clear as mud. Any questions? I'm watching the chat. Okay, seeing none, thank you all. Oh, Senator Brummett has a question. Never mind. Yes.
Typed in the chat this time. What happens, call me an optimistic, but what happens if 12 months from now, we don't need those tests? We'll just have them?
I mean, yes, we will still have them. And because it's contractual, therefore we're forced to pay for it no matter what.
Okay.
But just based off like science and everything, like what I've been reading is that, COVID is looking like it's going to become like a recurring thing, kind of like the flu. So it'll probably be beneficial to future years of K-Staters as well. I don't imagine that coronavirus will be entirely erased by like September of next year. Like I think it'll still be with us. So, but thank you for your question. Are there any other questions at this time? Seeing none, we'll now move on to Resolution 44. Vice President Lundin's been waiting a while. You can just summarize, Lane.
Okay. All right. Hope everyone's been having a good week thus far. So this is Resolution 2021-44, fiscal year 2022 allocations of Educational Opportunity Fund by the Educational Opportunity Fund Committee. So this year we have maybe 300,000. We are still very unsure. So we've been trying to be very conservative in our funding. We do have $65,000, roughly $65,000 in reserves, but we were advised to kind of predict that there will be more budget cuts in the future and to likewise be conservative with that as well. The EOF committee considered 24 proposals for fiscal year 2022. They were all given opportunity to submit requests. So for scholarships, we wanted to do, or I guess with graduate student positions or graduate research positions, instead of funding at 12 months, we wanted to be consistent across the board and do 9-month positions just because we wanted to decrease some of the fundings. We funded scholarships at 90% of the regular amount. Can you go back up a little?
Sorry.
It's okay. Due to significant financial constraints, the EOF committee did, my bad. Some of these don't follow the 12-month and 90% guidelines for various reasons. So for the Developing Scholars Program supplemental research, we decided to decrease by 500 just because these are usually going to posters and this year it is online. And we figured if there is any cost to students, reducing it by 500 would only be just like a tiny little bit of cost to each student. Okay. We reduced the Federal Work Study Program by 500 just because that's the end of the year celebration. We didn't expect that to actually happen. Some of the ones that we did not adhere to the guidelines are like the non-traditional and veteran student services office 12-month position. After talking to them, they described how the 3 months in the summer are very important to them. Otherwise, the monies would be kind of wasteful because in those 3 summer months, they do not, that's when all of the action happens. They do the orientation. That is when they kind of explain everything to them. We did not fund 3 positions at all. They were the JED programming and I can see it. One was the Developing Scholars Program Graduate Assistant. They had overlapping positions with another graduate assistantship. We talked to them. They decided that they would rather have the OURCI funded rather than that one. We did not fund line item number 9 or 111 because that also had overlapping positions and this was the more expensive position. The Intercultural Learning Academic Success and JED programming, as much as we wanted to fund it, this was not historically funded and that is something in our guidelines that we do not adhere to. We suggested to have them go to SCTE where they could possibly get funding. We did not want to touch the international student scholarships. We left that the same just because we are one of the only sources of funding for them. To make sure that there was not more money given to the non-traditional student services than we had originally planned. We agreed to have a deficit of what normally would be.
Looks like Lane's time has expired. Lane, it's not that I don't love like hearing you discuss this. So if someone wants to make a motion, allow them to finish, you can, but this information is all in. Chair Brown moved for 2 minutes. So second, is there a second? Second, any objections? Okay, you have 2 minutes.
Sorry if I'm over explaining this, but we did not want to give more to the non-traditional and veteran student services than what was already agreed upon. So we took the deficit from what would normally be a 9-month position to a 12-month position and took that from their scholarships that they would normally give out. We discussed it with them. They were okay with it. And we did not fund the Academic Achievement Center graduate assistantship because they are also overlapping, and the other, like the tutoring center graduate assistantship seemed more pertinent and had more benefits to many students.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Are there any questions for Vice President Lundeen about this legislation? Seeing none, just checking. Any questions? Yeah, and this is all explained in the whereas clauses. I just want to let everyone know. So
And there is one amendment that we would be putting in to explain the undergraduate student positions DMSA, why they are not funded for their requested amount. We have to fund them at federal minimum wage. We forgot to put that in before, and we caught it in Senate exec, and that will be amended as needed.
yeah,
And this
so
will be
this will be referred to Senate exec, so we'll work on it and get those corrections made. Any other questions from the body? Seeing none, thank you so much, Lane.
Thank you all.
With that, we're going to move to resolution 45, which is recommendations regarding updated Title IX at K-State. Sarah, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, perfect. I'm just gonna scroll to the end if you want to summarize, since those of you who remember last week, Director Haggard presented a presentation explaining this resolution. So I'm just gonna scroll to the end to like what the official requests are, if that's okay with you, Sarah.
That works. Definitely. Everything else is just like evidence and a little more background information supporting the sections. So it's cool if I just read the sections. If you have any questions, like just feel free to like pop in and ask real quick. So starting out with section 1, it just entails that we, the student senate, ask the Kansas State University to take additional measures to ensure the most professional possible experience for both parties, which is like includes the complainant who filed the report and the respondent who is subject of the report, to offer them both the most professional experience possible during this federally required hearing process, which is both live and recorded according to the federal regulations. And also uses a medium that allows for cross-examination without using face-to-face interaction, because currently K-State has opted for a Zoom option. I know you all heard this last week, but I'm just going to go over it again really quick. So K-State opted for a Zoom option instead of we're at the discretion to have both parties maybe in separate rooms and interact through their advisors. Like there was no direct interaction required whatsoever within the federal regulations. It was just K-State's decision to have the whole hearing process through Zoom, where if the complainant is a survivor, they would have to face their perpetrator through Zoom, and cameras were required to be on. And when I asked the Title IX coordinator, what could survivors do to avoid seeing the face of the perpetrator, he's told me that they could put a Post-it note over their screen so they did not have to see that person's face. That's not a good situation that we should have to be in, because we are at the discretion to change that. This is the most important thing I would like all of you to know about this resolution. This is our top priority to get changed. We can have this be a much more professional situation with much less re-traumatization for either party through more indirect interaction. So yes, that's very important. Section 2 discusses how the CARE Office, the Center for Advocacy, Response, and Education, our fantastic survivor advocacy group on campus, was not involved in the implementation of this process starting in May until August, when the university was at the discretion, again, to include CARE, but when first asked about it, they said they were required by the federal regulations to not involve advocacy groups or biased organizations in the implementation process. That was not true. They could have involved CARE, they just didn't, and we really let down all the students who will have to go through this process by not involving CARE in this process, because CARE is an expert in everything Title IX and everything to do with trauma-informed training. They were asked to provide the training required for this entire policy process by the Office of Institutional Equity, who kind of makes these decisions. That's the second part of this section 2, is it just asking the Office of Institutional Equity to allow the CARE office to design the training as they see fit, because right now there's a lot of restrictions and time limits that they're given that are not really necessary. So just asking that the CARE office be allowed to develop that training as they see fit, because they're the experts here. And then the final thing is CARE's description in the Title IX policy uses some language that may result in students not deciding to turn to the CARE office as a resource. For example, the fact that any information shared at CARE is confidential is not mentioned. And it's also mentioned that if a student goes to the CARE office, a CARE office staff member will encourage the student to report, which is also not true. So just to summarize section 2 really quick, asking that in the future, K-State involve CARE in matters involving Title IX, because they didn't this time, and that really is unfortunate for students who will have to go through with this current process. Asking that CARE be allowed to develop the training as they see fit. Training was like asked by the Office of Institutional Equity. So CARE's kind of doing them a favor here by providing this training, and yet there's still like so many restrictions that they have to deal with. And then letting CARE change their description in the Title IX policy to encourage students to turn to them as a resource, because CARE is an excellent resource. The third section is talking about the decision maker position. We are at the discretion, again, to have a panel of decision makers as opposed to a single decision maker to offer for a more equitable judging system. The Title IX coordinator, Scott Jones, has told me with enough evidence, which I can provide, and support from the Student Senate, he would be willing to change this requirement from an individual to a panel of people. So I am very excited to know that we can make some active change here and make this a more equitable process with less individual bias, just from this support from this resolution. Section 4 talks about how in the current federal Title IX policy, if something happens outside of the United States, someone can report it, but an investigation cannot be started. But the federal regulations do state that universities are at the discretion to create a policy that offers students or members of K-State recourse if they face a Title IX violation abroad. K-State has no such policy as of this moment, so asking the Office of Institutional Equity to develop this kind of policy, which is pretty important, because it's just very unfortunate that if something were to happen abroad, nothing could be done right now.
Time for the speaker has expired. Is there a motion? We're just about done here. If I can get a short little bit. Moved by 5 minutes was first. That was seconded by Senator Hurd. Are there any objections? Seeing none, Sarah, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you. I'm definitely going through this as fast as possible. I know we are all very tired. So moving on to section 5. Yes, so basically in the current process, the only person who views reports regarding Title IX is Scott Jones, and he alone decides whether or not to move forward with an investigation, based on whether or not that's in the university's best interest. There's some statistics on how many reports were made and how many actually warranted investigations at the top. And according to the national average of like incidents that happen on college campuses, we are nowhere near like the level we should be in regards to like whether or not a violation occurs. Then again, you do have to take into account whether or not that's within Title IX's jurisdiction. No matter what, it's good to have a second party. We suggest that a second party review and second Scott's decisions. This one is a lot less likely to happen just because of all the legal hurdles we would have to jump, but it is very important to include so that everyone who knows about this resolution just understands that as of right now, there's only one person reviewing those reports. And on the Title IX forum that was there at the beginning of the year, a lot of people were commenting like, I made a report and I never heard back. That was multiple people making that claim, which is pretty upsetting because we wouldn't want a single person to not get any feedback on a report that they made. So just letting everyone know that only one person reviews these reports, and we would like if a second person could review and second those decisions, aside from Scott Jones or someone else at the Office of Institutional Equity. I have talked to Dr. Lane about filling that position. That's something I can look into once this resolution is passed with the support of the Student Senate. As of Section 6, this is the biggest one. This is the Greek life request. We did make a resolution back in 2016, basically asking the same thing, that the university reintegrate Greek life back into the university, because as of right now, Greek life Title IX investigations are done by the students with very little accountability behind closed doors. And that's a huge burden to put on the shoulders of students in Greek life. That's not something they should have to deal with. We have a whole office dedicated to doing that. But because they're unaffiliated, that's just how the process occurs right now. And according to the federal regulations, so K-State's argument before the new federal regulations was that they did not exercise substantial control over the respondent and the situation of harassment. Well, in the new federal regulations, it says whether or not this, as long as a student organization is recognized by the university, it doesn't matter if it's on or off campus, and it doesn't matter how much control the university exercises over the respondent or the situation of sexual harassment. It still needs to be, the investigations still need to proceed under the university as a whole. So technically, we're not in compliance with the federal regulations, and we are at risk for losing federal funding in this regard. And it's very important that we bring that up again to administration and ask, we want the Greek life to be reintegrated into the university, so we can investigate Title IX violations as a member, as a united front of the university. Section 7 also talks about how we are not in compliance with the federal regulations, and again, at risk of losing federal funding because of the fact that there's a procedure is not currently in place. We don't have people selected to be the decision maker. We don't have people selected to be the university provided advisor. If you have questions on that, I did present on that last week, but if you want to ask, I can answer again. We don't have training currently in place. So if someone was to file a report and it was found within the jurisdiction of Title IX, an investigation would not be able to begin, and there would probably be a long waiting period because this isn't currently in place, and the federal regulations had mandated that we be in compliance, which is basically means like have this process ready by August 14th. And the fact that we still don't have that ready, and the fact that after talking with the Title IX coordinator, I found out that reports have already been made this year, and none of them were within Title IX jurisdiction, and yet we still didn't have the process in place in case any of them were within the jurisdiction, which is also very concerning. So those are all the sections. Really quick, I do want to mention, I am currently waiting to make a few amendments, including stuff based off of what other universities are doing. I'm currently in contact with KU about what they're doing. Hopefully I'll have that amendment ready when I present this to the Governmental Relations Committee. I'm also expecting feedback from the judicial branch on whether how a panel is better than an individual in terms of a decision maker. And I'm also going through a lot of feedback from all of the senators and people I've emailed this to. I still have some edits to make. I have some authors to add and some people to add to Section 8. And really quick, if any of you want to review this resolution and give me any feedback, I would be very, very happy to talk to any of you or answer any questions you may have. So I just put my email in the chat. Please email me if you want to read this resolution or learn anything more about Title IX, because I can definitely help you or direct you to the CARE office. This is a really important resolution, and I know that we're all very tired. But I want to thank you all for your time, and I want you all to understand that this affects a lot of people at K-State, and passing this can really help us make a difference in terms of people who have to go through with this process, especially if they're a survivor and don't want to be re-traumatized through this process. So any involvement is great involvement, and we can really have an impact in our local college community with this. Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions?
Are there any questions for Director Haggard about this resolution? Good news is we had a presentation last week, so we're already pretty informed.
I'm so glad I didn't put that off to this week, because that would have been way longer.
Any questions at all from the body? Seeing, we have just phenomenal work, which is always a plus. Yeah. Are there any, I'm not seeing any questions. So with that, we'll move on. It looks like we have exhausted our legislative agenda for tonight. So are there any speakers for second open period at this time? Please indicate so in the chat. As Maggie said, we'll still read Senate shout outs, but we're gonna do it after adjournment. So we'll keep the Zoom call open and that way people can like still hear them if they want to, but we won't keep anyone against their will. So any second open period speakers? Seeing none, we will now move into reference of legislation. So where everything's being sent. So Bill 22, the Student Code of Conduct amendments will be going to the Senate Executive Committee. Bill 23, the elections regulations goes to Senate Ops. 24, the travel allocation to travel allocations. 43, the bond surplus funds will be going to privilege fee. Educational opportunity funds will be going to Senate Executive Committee, and the Title IX policy will be going to the Governmental Relations Committee, since that's a federal policy. With that, I am going to formally skip second roll call tonight. We have a quorum based off the numbers on the Zoom call. I know who's been here. I can see at least 15 people in front of me, and since there's no voting items, I have the ability to see who's here right now through the chat feature and stuff. So I'm not worried about that there. So with that, we will just move directly into adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved by Senator Bain, seconded by Senator Heimerman. Are there any objections? Seeing none, we will stand officially adjourned at this time. But if you want to hear Senate shout outs, Maggie's going to read them. So feel free to log off. Feel free to log off the call if you want to. But if you need to leave, please leave. So we won't hold anyone against their will. So everyone have a great night.
All right, everyone, we are at a fat 29 responses. I'll make this snappy. Yeah, there's some swear words in here, so team. All right. To everyone who made a hybrid Senate possible, thank you for this experience. Shout out to Ashley Grills. She's one tough son of a gun. She's never afraid to stand up for herself on the Priv Fee Committee, even when her opinion isn't popular. 2 snaps and a clapping reaction for Ashley. Shout out to, oh, thanks. Shout out to me for bullying and tabbing the agenda. Yeah, the agenda was like cute tonight. So if you ever present anything, I'll try to make it cute for you. Go Ag. Shout out to Ashley Girls and Rachel Gromas for being great student advocates. To Nathan Bothwell for looking super good tonight during an international pandemic. Marta for always being excited for SGA and bringing positive energy. Exclamation point, smiley face.
Thank you.
Shout out to everyone who made the hybrid Senate format tonight possible. Shout out to Marcus Kidd. He isn't appreciated nearly enough, but he is the glue holding this campus together. That's facts. This one is my personal favorite of the evening, so please listen up. Blake Phillips is my knight in shining armor. Like really, really shiny armor. Armor so shiny, it could potentially blind you. Seriously, the armor is more useful for blinding people than protecting him from getting injured. Can we just, that one was so good. All right, to Lily for fostering a fun and welcoming environment in GR. Your kindness does not go unnoticed, smiley face. To Blake Phillips for always being helpful and encouraging. This one just says, Mara will marry me. There's not a question, sorry.
2020, I was right. Come on.
Oh, to everyone who spoke tonight and advocated for their opinions, I'm proud to be part of this organization. Smiley face. Yeah, definitely. You go, Lily. Caucus Leader Diaz de Leon's outfit is absolutely amazing. Great debate, everyone. Shout out to Speaker Bothwell for keeping us on track. Shout out to AG Hess for sticking with us, sticking with Senate through all of our poop. Shout out to Max Harmon and Blake Phillips for opposing everything I say. Committee and Senate would not be nearly as entertaining without both of your oppositions against me. I appreciate your dedication to KSU students, though. Shout out to our new senators, Alexis Shear and Reese Williams. This was a heck of a first meeting to have to go through, but we are so excited for you to be part of SGA. Shout out to Rachel Gromas for wearing a cute blank outfit today. Yeah. Absolute stud. Shout out to Cameron Coker for never getting Senate shout outs. Shout out to everyone for the great debate tonight. Shout out to Lily for being a great debater. For the review committee members, thanks for spending a lot of time on the code of conduct. Yeah, that's such important work. Thank you, guys. Shout out to me for my snazzy dog socks. If you want to see them, they're in my office. They have my dog's face on them. Shout out to Director Haggard for being a tireless advocate for those who may find themselves within a vulnerable and traumatizing experience. And finally, shout out to Senator Grills for her effort in voicing student concerns and interests. With that, that concludes this evening's Senate shoutouts.
Zoom call is officially ending. Everyone have a great night. Bye.
Light up your station.
Yeah. There is stuff up there.